The slush in the Chicago alley was a filthy shade of gray, stained with things I didn't want to think about. It was also freezing my ass off, seeping through my torn jacket. Not that it mattered. The gaping hole in my gut where a Z-lister had taken a souvenir was doing a much faster job of killing me. My eyes, however, were locked on the two figures at the end of the alley. Mark, my best friend of 10 years. Jessica, the woman I thought I'd marry. They were laughing. Genuinely, happily laughing as a goon from some trash-tier gang handed them a loaf of bread so green with mold it could have been a science experiment. The price? 1 dose of military-grade antibiotics. My last dose. The one that could have saved me. He was a goner anyway, I heard Mark say. His voice carried on the biting wind. This is a better use for it. We gotta eat. Jessica, my sweet Jessica, leaned in and kissed him. You always know what's best, honey. I tried to scream. To curse them. To call down every hell I could imagine upon their heads. But all that came out was a wet, gurgling sound as my own blood filled my throat. 5 years. 5 years of hell, fighting, starving, and surviving, only to be taken out by the two people I trusted most for a FC King piece of moldy bread. My last thought wasn't of love or a life well lived. It was a single, burning, all-consuming promise. I will find you. I will make you beg for an end as quick as this. Then, darkness. Snap. My eyes shot open. Sunlight. Warmth. The faint smell of a pine tree air freshener and old coffee. I was sitting upright, my hands gripping the familiar worn leather of my Ford F-150 steering wheel. My stomach was whole. No pain. No freezing slush. No gurgling blood. Ethan? Hello? Earth to Ethan? I turned my head. Sitting in the passenger seat, grinning like an idiot, was Mark. Younger. Healthier. Not the gaunt, paranoid survivor I'd last seen, but the chubby, cheerful bro I'd known before the world went to SHT. He was wearing a stupidly bright polo shirt. Dude, you completely zoned out, he said with a laugh. You look like you've seen a ghost. Come on, step on it. We're gonna be late for Jessica's birthday dinner. Jessica's birthday. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around. We were parked outside my old apartment complex. The world outside was green. Normal. People walked their dogs. Kids rode bikes. There were no boarded-up windows, no shambling corpses, no distant screams. My left hand, the one that should have been wearing my grandfather's signet ring, felt strangely bare. I lifted it. The ring was gone. In its place, etched onto the skin of my wrists like a ghostly gray tattoo, was a perfect, intricate compass rose. No ficking. Way. This wasn't heaven. It sure as hell wasn't hell, because my two personal demons were still walking around, breathing my air. This was a do-over. A god-tier mulligan. I was back. Ethan? Seriously, man, what's up? Mark's smile was starting to falter, replaced by a flicker of concern. That pathetic, fake concern he'd probably worn right after smashing my head against the pavement. I didn't answer him. I just stared. I stared at his clueless, punchable face. My mind was racing, a supercomputer rebooting with 5 years of future data. The great filter. It all came flooding back. T-minus 6 months and 14 days until the superstorms that would cripple global agriculture. Food prices would skyrocket. Panic buying would begin. T-minus 2 months until the unseasonal blizzards and heat waves that would shatter the power grid in half the country. T-minus 1 day until the black rain. The day it all ended. The day the virus Z spores rained down from the sky and turned 90% of the population into flesh-eating monsters. And T-minus about 5 minutes until I was supposed to take this piece of SHT to a birthday dinner for the BTCH, who would one day trade my life for bread. A smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a shark gives right before it bites a seal in half. It was a smile full of malice and glorious, beautiful promise. Mark visibly flinched. Whoa, dude. That's a creepy look. My internal monologue was having a party. Oh, you think this is creepy? Wait until you're scraping frozen rats off the pavement for a meal, while I'm eating Wagyu A5 in my heated bunker, you backstabbing sack of SHT. You haven't seen creepy yet. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. Finally, Mark said, relieved. For a second there, I thought you were gonna... Cancel it, I said. My voice was calm, level, and colder than the Chicago alley I just died in. Mark blinked. Cancel what? The dinner? Are you nuts? Jessica will kill you. And me. I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. Oh, I'm counting on it. I put the truck in drive, but instead of heading towards the downtown restaurant district, I turned the wheel hard, pulling a U-turn that made the tires squeal. Whoa, Ethan, where are you going? The restaurant is the other way, Mark yelled, grabbing the OSHT handle. I have more important things to do, I said, flooring it. More important than your girlfriend's birthday? What's more important than that? My grin widened. Everything. My mind was a whirlwind of glorious, high-definition planning. The first step was money. Lots of it. I needed an obscene, ridiculous, buy a small country amount of cash. In my past life, I was just a mid-level project manager with some savings. Now I had the ultimate cheat code. Foreknowledge. And the ring. The compass tattoo on my wrist was humming with a faint energy. I focused on it, and a mental picture, clear as day, flooded my mind. It was an interface, like a video game inventory, a vast, black, empty space, waiting to be filled. The dimensional space. Holy crap. It wasn't just a dream. Infinite storage. Time stasis. My own personal pocket dimension where I could stash an entire Costco, and it would stay fresh for 1,000,000 years. The game had changed. No, FCK that. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was the goddamn game master. Ethan, pull over. You're acting insane. Mark was genuinely panicked now, his face pale. Get out, I said, not even looking at him. What? I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road with a jerk. I said, get out of my truck. But why? What did I do? He looked so confused, so innocent. It was almost funny. In a pathetic, I'm going to enjoy your future suffering kind of way. I finally turned to look him in the eye. I didn't let any of my rage show. Instead, I gave him a look of pure, clinical disinterest, like a scientist looking at a bug he was about to squash. Mark, I said, my voice dangerously soft. Our friendship is over. My relationship with Jessica is over. Don't call me. Don't text me. If I see you on the street, I will walk past you like I don't know you. Are we clear? His jaw just kind of hung there. He looked like a goldfish that had been told the concept of water was a lie. But why? We're going to her birthday. I bought her that necklace you helped me pick out. The necklace. I remember that piece of crap. He'd later trade it for 2 cans of cold beans and think he got a good deal. That's your problem now, I said. My patience gone. Get out, or I'll drag you out. The look in my eyes must have finally gotten through his thick skull. The fake bro cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by a flicker of fear. He fumbled with the door handle and stumbled out onto the curb, nearly tripping over his own feet. He stood there, polo shirt and khakis looking utterly ridiculous, as I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, leaving him in a cloud of exhaust fumes. 1 down. 1 to go. But first, funding. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. Why work hard when you can work smart? Scheming, fraud, leveraging my future knowledge of stock market crashes? That was all too slow, too complicated. It left a paper trail. I needed a clean, untraceable injection of capital. A miracle. And I knew exactly where to find one. 3 weeks from now, in my old timeline, a Powerball jackpot of $758.7 million was won by a single ticket sold in Massachusetts. But a week before that, a smaller, less newsworthy Mega Millions jackpot of $42 million was won by a ticket sold right here, in this city. Nobody claimed it for months. I remembered reading about it, thinking, man, imagine being that lucky. I wasn't lucky. I was inevitable. I knew the numbers by heart. I'd seen them on the news a dozen times. 1, 17, 28, 45, 52, and the Mega Ball, 9. They were burned into my memory, a testament to a life I could have had. Now, they were the keys to my new kingdom. I whipped the truck into the parking lot of a 7-Eleven. The place smelled of stale coffee and desperation, a perfect preview of the coming world. I walked past the sad-looking hot dogs rotating on their greasy rollers, and straight to the counter. A bored-looking teenager with a bad haircut and a name tag that read Kevin looked up from his phone. Help you? He asked, clearly annoyed at the interruption to his doom scrolling. Yeah, I said, grabbing a lottery slip. My hand was perfectly steady as I filled in the bubbles. 1, 17, 28, 45, 52, Megaball 9. It felt electric. This single piece of paper was the foundation of everything. It was the concrete for my walls, the steel for my gates, the bullets for my guns. It was the 5-star meals, the vintage whiskey, and the hot showers I'd enjoy while the world outside froze and starved. It was the down payment on my revenge. I slid the slip and a $5 bill across the counter. Just this. Kevin sighed, the sound of a soul dying a slow death by customer service. He ran the ticket. The machine whirred and spat out a small, flimsy piece of paper. My golden ticket. He handed it to me without a second glance. To him, it was just another loser's prayer. To me, it was a declaration of war. I walked out of the 7-Eleven, the setting sun casting long shadows. I looked at the ticket in my hand. $42 million. It was a good start. A cute little seed fund for the apocalypse. I got back in my truck and carefully placed the ticket in my wallet. Then I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Jessica's contact photo. That smiling face, so full of fake love. My finger twitched. It would be so easy to call her, to scream at her, to ruin her birthday. But no, that was the old Ethan. Impulsive. Emotional. The new Ethan was a predator. And predators don't announce their presence. They set traps. They wait. They watch their prey walk right into them, fat, dumb, and happy, right up until the very last second. Her birthday dinner would be ruined, all right. But not tonight. Her whole life was going to be ruined, piece by agonizing piece. And I was going to have a front row seat. I started the truck. 6 months. It wasn't a lot of time. But for a man with a blueprint of the future and a bottomless shopping cart, it was more than enough. Game on, you mother, FCKERS. 1 week. 7 days since I respawned into the world of the living, and the most difficult part was pretending everything was normal. Going to my old project manager job, nodding at spreadsheets, and listening to my boss drone on about Q3 deliverables felt like an out-of-body experience. Every idiot talking about their weekend plans or the latest celebrity gossip was just white noise. They were the walking dead. They just didn't know it yet. But I played my part. I was the model employee, the friendly neighbor, the guy who hadn't just died in a gut-strewn alley 5 years in the future. The lottery numbers were drawn on a Tuesday night. I didn't even watch it live, I already knew the outcome. The next morning, I walked out of my apartment, lottery ticket safely tucked in my wallet, and drove to the state lottery headquarters. There was no joy, no fist-pumping celebration. This was just step one of a very, very long to-do list. The bureaucrats behind the counter looked at me like I was some kind of freak for being so calm. They probably expected tears or a screaming fit. I just signed the papers, opted for the lump sum cash payout, around $27 million after the government took its greedy bite, and gave them the details for a newly created bank account. It was a transaction, as exciting as buying groceries. The real prize wasn't the money. It was what the money could buy. Time, security, and a front row seat to the downfall of my enemies. My phone started blowing up the second the news hit. Friends I hadn't heard from in years. Distant cousins who'd forgotten my name. And of course, the main attractions of this circus. I ignored them all. My first stop was not a dealership for a new sports car, but my own bank. I sat across from a loan manager, a slick guy in an ill-fitting suit named Todd. I'd already withdrawn every cent of my 401k and savings. Now it was time for phase 2. So, Mr. Cole, Todd said, trying to look professional while practically drooling, you want to take out a mortgage against your condo and a personal line of credit, maxed out? That's right, I said, leaning back, and a business loan. I'm starting a high-end organic farm. My internal monologue was cackling. Oh, Todd, you poor, clueless bastard. This money you're lending me? It has a better chance of being repaid by Elvis Presley's ghost than by me. The financial system you worship is about to become a historical footnote. With my lottery winnings as collateral, they threw money at me. I walked out that afternoon with access to another couple million in credit. I sold my condo to a cash-buy company for a lowball offer because I didn't have time to haggle. Who cares about losing a few grand when the entire concept of property value was about to evaporate? By the end of the day, I had liquidated my entire pre-apocalypse life. Everything was now a clean, beautiful, untraceable number in a bank account. I was sitting in the penthouse suite of a 5-star hotel I'd booked for a month, my new temporary command center, when the call I was waiting for finally came. The screen lit up with a name that now made my skin crawl. Jessica. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speaker. Ethan? Thank God you finally answered. I've been calling you all day. We've all been so worried. Her voice was a masterclass in fake concern, with that cloying, whiny undertone she used when she wanted something. I've been busy, I said, my voice flat. I was simultaneously browsing a government auction site for a decommissioned military truck on my laptop. Busy? Honey, your phone has been off? And, oh my God, is it true? Mark saw on the news. Did you really win the lottery? She dropped the question in like it was a casual afterthought, but I could hear the desperate greed thrumming beneath every syllable. There it is. The money sniffer in its natural habitat. She probably thinks we're about to go house shopping in Beverly Hills, the stupid cow. Yeah, I said. There was a beat of stunned silence on her end. She clearly expected more. A gushing explanation, an apology for ignoring her, an invitation to share in the wealth. Yeah? Just, yeah? Ethan, what is wrong with you? First, you ditch my birthday party without a word. You leave Mark stranded on the side of the road. And now you win $42 million and all you can say is, yeah? Her voice was rising, the fake sweetness cracking to reveal the entitled shrew underneath. I thought we were a team. I thought we were going to build a life together. I almost laughed. A team? The only team she was on was team betrayal. The life she wanted to build was on top of my corpse. My response was to take a calm sip of the obscenely expensive whiskey I'd ordered from room service. The 25-year-old single malt burned a pleasant path down my throat. We're not, I said. We're not? What? What does that even mean? She shrieked. It means, Jessica, I said, my voice dropping to the same temperature as that Chicago alley, that we are over. Don't call me again. I hung up before she could let out the screech I knew was coming. Then, with a sense of profound satisfaction, I opened my contacts. I found her name. Block. I found Mark's name. Block. I went through and blocked his parents, her parents, and anyone in their immediate social circle. It was a digital amputation. Clean, swift, and completely necessary. They were now ghosts to me. Annoying ghosts who couldn't even haunt me. Let them stew. Let them wonder. Let them go from excitement over my fortune to rage and confusion. It was the first small serving of the shit sandwich. I was going to force feed them for the rest of their short, miserable lives. Now, for the real work. The world thought I was a new multi-millionaire about to go on a bender. The reality was I was a doomsday prepper on steroids with a god-tier cheat code. My hotel room looked like a villain's lair. Laptops were open everywhere. One was logged into a precious metals exchange, where I was converting a third of my cash into gold and silver bars. Real currency when paper money becomes toilet paper. Another was on a dark web adjacent site for discreet international shipping. My dimensional space was a bottomless void, a hungry god waiting to be fed. And I was about to serve it a feast. The list started simple, then spiraled into glorious excess. My finger was a blur on the trackpad. Click. Add to cart. Click. Max quantity. Food. Not just MREs and canned beans. I was thinking bigger. Pallets upon pallets of freeze-dried gourmet meals. Wagyu beef, lobster bisque, truffle risotto. I found a restaurant supplier and bought out their entire premium inventory. We're talking hundreds of pounds of heirloom grains, artisan cheeses vacuum sealed, and enough top-shelf coffee to keep a small nation wired for a decade. All of it vanished into the space, perfectly preserved by the time stasis field. While the world fought over scraps, I'd be debating whether to have the Chilean sea base or the duck confit for dinner. Water. 50 industrial-grade water purifiers, each capable of cleaning thousands of gallons a day, along with thousands of replacement filters. Water would be more valuable than gold soon. I'd be able to fill swimming pools with it. Power. A full-scale solar farm's worth of panels, enough to cover several acres. Industrial-sized battery banks, the kind used for data centers. 3 massive diesel generators, just in case. And the fuel. I contracted a wholesale fuel distributor for multiple tanker trucks worth of diesel and gasoline, delivered to a, quote, temporary storage facility I rented. From there, I siphoned it all, tanker by tanker, into my space. Defense. This was the fun part. Thanks to my foreknowledge, I knew which small-time arms dealers would look the other way for a massive cash purchase. I bought semi-automatic rifles by the crate, handguns by the dozen, and more ammunition than a third-world army. Night vision goggles, thermal scopes, body armor, combat knives. All of it disappeared with a thought. While those 2 morons were probably getting drunk and bitching about how I'd changed, I was orchestrating a logistics operation that would make Amazon's Prime Day look like a lemonade stand. In the middle of my shopping spree, I finalized the centerpiece of my entire plan. Through a shell corporation registered in Delaware and handled by a high-priced law firm, I bought it. A 500-acre ranch in the most remote part of Montana. Completely isolated, surrounded by mountains, with a river running through it. It was perfect. It wasn't just a property. It was the foundation of my kingdom. The sanctuary. The TV in the corner of my suite was on a 24-hour news channel, the volume low. A reporter was standing in front of a CGI weather map, showing a massive, angry red blob over the Pacific. Unprecedented super typhoon is expected to make landfall in Southeast Asia, with meteorologists baffled by its rapid intensification. I smirked. Baffled. They were about to spend the next 6 months being baffled. Stage 1, the storms of the prelude. It was beginning, right on schedule. The world was focused on a storm half a world away, ignoring the cancer that was already growing in its own backyard. My kingdom was purchased. My war chest was being filled. But a king needs a castle. The ranch was a blank canvas, a beautiful but vulnerable piece of land. I needed walls. I needed a fortress. I pulled up a satellite image of the property on my main screen, zooming in. My mind, forged in 5 years of desperate survival, saw it not as it was, but as it would be. The outer perimeter. A 10-foot deep trench, too wide for a vehicle to cross, backed by a 15-foot-high electrified fence. The inner wall. 20-foot-high reinforced concrete, topped with razor wire and watchtowers at each corner. The main house, gutted and rebuilt with steel-reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, and hydraulic steel blast doors. And beneath it all, the heart of the sanctuary. A sprawling, subterranean bunker complex, with living quarters, hydroponic farms, a medical bay, a workshop, and my primary vault. The scale of it was insane. The kind of project that would take years and attract an army of investigators. I only had 6 months. The logistics of building it in total secrecy was the real puzzle. How do you build a doomsday fortress without every contractor and local busybody knowing you're building a doomsday fortress? A slow, predatory grin spread across my face as the answer clicked into place. It was wonderfully simple. Devious. You don't hire one company to build a fortress. You hire a dozen different companies, each to build one small, seemingly unrelated piece of a much larger, much deadlier puzzle. One company to dig a, quote, large swimming pool, another to install an agricultural irrigation system, a third to build a storm shelter, a fourth to erect a, quote, high-security fence for exotic livestock. They'd never talk to each other. They'd never see the whole picture. They would just be cogs in my machine, each happily taking my money, while unknowingly building the very walls that would one day keep them out. They were building their own tomb, and they were going to do it with a smile on their faces. I leaned back in the plush hotel chair, the city lights glittering below like the doomed souls they were. The game wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about thriving. It was about absolute, unquestionable dominance. And I was just getting started. 5 months, 3 weeks left on the clock. The world was still turning, blissfully unaware that it was on a collision course with a planet-sized brick wall. My 5-star hotel suite had officially morphed from a command center into a logistics hub that would make FedEx green with envy. Mornings weren't for coffee and the news anymore. They were for managing a fleet of ghost corporations and orchestrating the single greatest hoarding spree in human history. Operation Fill the Void was in full swing. My cheat code, the dimensional space tied to the tattoo on my wrist, was a bottomless stomach, and I was its personal shopper. But I wasn't an idiot. You can't just have 27 tanker trucks of diesel delivered to your mom's basement. Secrecy was paramount. I'd set up a dozen shell corporations online. Big Sky Agricultural Solutions, Montana Secure Storage LLC, Riverbend Irrigation Systems. They sounded boring as hell, which was the point. Each LLC rented out massive, anonymous warehouses in different industrial parks across the country. One in Nevada, one in Utah, another in Idaho. A beautiful logistical daisy chain that led back to no one. The internet became my weapon. I wasn't walking down aisles pushing a cart. I was wielding a trackpad like a god, moving mountains with a click. My first target was a national restaurant supply conglomerate. Their website was designed for bulk orders, but not the kind of bulk I had in mind. I bypassed the consumer-facing junk and accessed their commercial portal. Click. 10 pallets of freeze-dried AAA-grade Wagyu beef steaks. Click. 5 pallets of flash-frozen lobster tails. Click. 200 cases of Italian black truffle oil. Click. A literal ton of artisan pasta, vacuum-sealed in 20-pound bags. Click. Enough premium Colombian coffee beans to give the entire population of Rhode Island a heart attack. The order was so large, it probably triggered every fraud alert in their system. A confirmation email popped up almost instantly. followed by a phone call a few minutes later. A guy named Dave, a regional supply manager, was on the line. His voice was slick, with the kind of false friendliness you only get from a salesman sniffing a massive commission. "Mr. Cole, this is Dave from Culinary Provisions. We just received your substantial order for your company, Big Sky Agricultural. Just wanted to personally confirm the details. This is quite the inventory for a new venture. Translation: who the hell are you, and is this real money?" "The details are correct," I said, my voice flat. I was busy on another laptop, bidding on a seized shipment of military-grade night vision goggles. Right, he said, clearing his throat. "It's just that, an order of this magnitude, there's a lot of logistical handling involved. Special arrangements that have to be made. Sometimes a little grease is needed to make sure the wheels turn smoothly and your shipment gets prioritized. You know how it is." I stopped clicking. Oh, I knew exactly how it was. This pencil pusher thought he had me cornered. He thought I was some clueless new money idiot he could squeeze for a kickback. He saw a massive order, and, instead of just processing it, his first thought was how he could skim off the top. This was the exact kind of small-time human greed that got 100 people killed in my last life over a can of beans. I didn't say a word. I let the silence hang in the air, thick and uncomfortable. I could practically hear him sweating on the other end. "Mr. Cole, you still there?" I tabbed back to my email. I typed out a new one to Dave's biggest competitor, a company I'd already researched. I copy-pasted my entire order from Dave's website, then doubled the quantity of every single item. In the special instructions field, I wrote, "Emergency rush order. Previous supplier, Culinary Provisions, contact Dave, was unable to fulfill due to logistical issues. Your prompt service will guarantee our exclusive, long-term business." I hit send. Then, I went back to the original order confirmation email from Dave. I hit reply. Subject, cancellation. Body, order number 74B391. ZULU is canceled. Effective immediately. I hit send again. Finally, I unmuted my mic. "Sorry, Dave. I was just finding a new supplier. Thanks for the motivation." I hung up. The pure, unadulterated satisfaction was better than any whiskey. I imagined that schmuck staring at his screen, watching a commission the size of his yearly salary evaporate, followed by a cancellation email, knowing he not only lost the sale but personally handed it to his biggest rival on a silver platter. He probably choked on his cheap coffee. Good? Choke. The world kept turning. TV news anchors, with their perfect hair and plastic smiles, talked about the unprecedented heat waves scorching the Midwest. Corn yields are projected to be down by a staggering 40%, one of them chirped, before cutting to a commercial for a new soft drink. People on social media complained that a box of cereal cost $1 more than it did last month. They were grumbling about pocket change, completely oblivious that the entire global food supply chain was starting to tear at the seams. While they were posting angry emojis about the price of avocados, I was visiting my new fulfillment centers. I'd fly a private jet to a small airfield near one of the warehouses. A rented truck was always waiting. I'd drive into the industrial park, unlock the roll-up door, and just stand there for a moment, basking in the glory. Pallets stacked to the ceiling. Crates of ammunition. Drums of fuel. Boxes of antibiotics. Rolls of bandages. Surgical kits. It was a temple of survival. I would walk through the aisles, my hand outstretched. With every touch, a pallet of MREs would vanish. A crate of AR-15s would disappear. A 500-gallon tank of diesel would phase out of existence. My dimensional space was the ultimate shopping cart. No heavy lifting, no 3-day shipping. Just touch and done. Within an hour, a warehouse containing enough supplies to sustain a small town for a year would be bone-dry empty. I'd drop the keys in a mailbox, drive the truck back to the rental agency, and be in the air before anyone even knew the delivery had been cleaned out. Back in Montana, the sanctuary was taking shape, piece by devious piece. My plan was working flawlessly. A company specializing in large-scale pools and water features was busy digging a 30-foot wide, 10-foot deep trench around the entire 500-acre property line. The foreman, a burly guy named Gus, thought I was some eccentric rich lunatic. "Biggest damn moat I've ever seen, Mr. Cole," he'd said, shaking his head. "You expecting alligators?" "Crocodiles," I'd replied, deadpan. He laughed. I didn't. At the same time, an agricultural fencing company was installing the posts for a 15-foot-high fence on the inner edge of the trench. Their contract specified it was for containing rare, volatile game animals and needed to be wired for a high-voltage charge. They didn't talk to Gus's crew. They just did their job. A third crew, a heavy construction firm from out of state, was pouring the foundation for a, quote, reinforced root cellar and storm shelter. They were working from a blueprint that showed a massive, multi-level concrete bunker, but they just thought I was paranoid about tornadoes. A fourth, a green energy company, was installing a solar array the size of a football field, along with a battery bank that could power a data center. Their paperwork called it the Off-Grid Living Initiative. Pool diggers, fencers, concrete pourers, and solar nerds. 4 different teams. 4 different contracts. 4 different cover stories. None of them had the full picture. They were all just happily cashing my checks, building my fortress for me while thinking they were working on some rich guy's weird hobby farm. They were all going to get a nice bonus when their part of the job was done, just before the world went to hell. Their last happy paycheck. One evening, while transferring the schematics for the automated turret placements from my laptop to a secure drive, a flicker of movement on another monitor caught my eye. It was a live feed from a security camera. I'd had a PI install on a telephone pole across from Mark's apartment building. It was a petty, vindictive expense, but worth every penny. There he was, my former best friend. The man who would, in another 5 years, leave me to die for a loaf of moldy bread. He was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear, his body language a mess of frustration and agitation. He looked like he'd lost weight. He was probably yelling at Jessica. Their perfect little life, built on my future fortune, had hit a snag. Me. For a week they must have been ecstatic. Ethan won. We're rich. They'd have planned it all out. The new cars, the fancy house, the life of leisure they felt they were owed. Then, silence. Blocked numbers. The lawyer I'd hired sent them a formal cease and desist letter when they tried to show up at the hotel. Their golden goose had not only flown the coop, but had carpet bombed it on the way out. Now, the giddiness had curdled into confusion, then rage, and now I could see it on his face even from the grainy camera feed. A creeping, desperate fear. The dream was slipping away. He threw his phone down on the asphalt with a frustrated grunt I couldn't hear, but could easily imagine. He looked up and down the street, as if searching for answers. He was starting to realize this wasn't just me being flaky. This was deliberate. This was calculated. And that's when the new thought would be taking root in his simple, greedy little brain. What is he doing? If he's not spending it on us, what is all that money for? A cold, thin smile touched my lips. Let him wonder. Let him investigate. Let him follow the breadcrumbs. It would be fun to watch him try to piece together a puzzle so far beyond his comprehension. He was a checkers player trying to understand a game of 5D chess being played across time and space. He wouldn't find a thing. But the act of looking would drive him mad. And that was a perfect appetizer for the main course I had planned for him. The world had 5 months left. For Mark and Jessica, their personal apocalypse had already begun. 4 months, 2 weeks to go. The Montana air was crisp, smelled like pine needles and imminent victory. My empire of dirt was getting a serious glow-up, while the wider world was freaking out about a looming recession and the fact that an iceberg the size of Delaware had just casually broken off Antarctica. I was focused on a much smaller, more satisfying demolition project, Mark's life. In my last life, over cheap beers he'd paid for with my money, Mark once drunkenly bragged about his little side hustle. He was a mid-level project manager at a mid-tier tech consulting firm called Omnicore Solutions. His genius scheme involved inflating expense reports for business trips he barely took and, more damningly, selling non-critical project analytics to a competitor through a shell consultant, which was, you guessed it, just him. It was a small-time, pathetic grift, but it netted him enough for a down payment on a flashy car and expensive dinners with Jessica. He was so proud of himself, the moron. He never imagined that the broke friend he was bragging to would one day have perfect recall and a T-Mobile account with unlimited data. Operation Yeet him into unemployment was a go. I didn't need a PI for this. I had the cheat codes. I drove to a town 50 miles away, bought a coffee at a bustling cafe, and used their public Wi-Fi through 3 layers of VPNs. On a newly created, untraceable email address, legal.whistleblower88@protonmail.com, I composed my masterpiece. It wasn't a rant. It was a goddamn surgical strike. 2. Its CEO's email, entire board of directors email list, head of HR's email, main competitor's CEO's email. Subject, urgent, internal fraud and corporate espionage by project manager Mark Peterson. The body of the email was clean, professional, and absolutely lethal. I listed dates, project numbers, and the exact amounts from his faked expense reports, which I remembered with soul-crushing clarity. I detailed the specific, non-proprietary but still valuable datasets he'd sold. I even included the name of his shell company, Peterson Strategic Insights, and the bank he used. It was like handing them an IKEA instruction manual for how to ruin his life. The email's crowning glory was the final paragraph. I am a concerned employee who believes in Omnicore's integrity. However, if swift and decisive action is not seen to be taken, this evidence, along with more sensitive information regarding project pipeline vulnerabilities, will be forwarded to every major tech news outlet and SEC investigator on my contact list. You have 48 hours. I hit send, took a sip of my latte, and dumped the burner laptop I'd used into a nearby bin. Total cost of the operation: one laptop, $5 for coffee. The schadenfreude? Priceless. I didn't have to wait 48 hours. The corporate world moves at the speed of light when it's trying to cover its own ass. Back at my hotel suite 1,000 miles away, I watched the live feed from the camera pointed at Omnicore's entrance. For 2 days, nothing. Then, on the third morning, showtime. I saw Mark stride into the building with his usual undeserved swagger. Half an hour later, a man in a crisp suit, the kind that screams, "I fire people for a living," walked into Mark's department. 10 minutes after that, Mark was escorted out. He wasn't walking with swagger anymore. He was clutching one of those pathetic little cardboard boxes filled with a desk plant and a coffee mug. His face was pale, his movements stiff. He looked like a dog who'd just been told he wasn't a good boy for the first time in his life. He fumbled his car keys twice before getting into his stupidly expensive car, the one I knew he was now hopelessly upside down on the payments for. That was the appetizer. The main course arrived about an hour later, delivered straight to my phone. The caller ID flashed, "The Leech." I almost let it go to voicemail just for the drama, but where's the fun in that? I answered, putting it on speaker. I was actually on site at the sanctuary, standing on a ridge overlooking my domain. The air was clean. Gus's alligator moat was finished and currently being filled with water diverted from the river. The rare game animal fence was up, a 15-foot-tall chain-link monster. A technician was making the final connections on the high-voltage system. The hum of potential electrocution was a soothing background noise. "Ethan? Ethan, thank God you picked up." Mark's voice was a frantic, squeaking mess. "Something terrible happened, man. A complete misunderstanding. They fired me. They're talking about lawyers, about pressing charges, some crazy anonymous email." I let him babble, a frantic torrent of excuses and panic. He was broke, he was screwed, his career was over. It was a symphony of self-inflicted misery. "That sounds rough, buddy," I said, my voice dripping with the kind of sympathy you'd give to a squashed bug on your windshield. A wave of desperate hope flooded his voice. "I knew you'd understand. Look, man, I know things have been weird between us, but I'm in deep trouble. With that lottery money, you could help me, right? A good lawyer, smooth things over. It's just money to you now, right? A drop in the bucket." There it was, the sheer, unmitigated gall. Even at his lowest, his first instinct was to see me as his personal ATM. Not a friend, a resource. I looked out at the massive construction crew pouring concrete for the 5-meter-thick perimeter wall of my inner sanctum. I looked at the trench, the fence, the army of solar panels gleaming on a nearby hill. My magnificent fortress of solitude, built to survive the end of the world. And he wanted me to spend my resources on him. I chuckled, a low, cold sound. "A lawyer? For you? Bruh." The silence on his end was heavy with confusion. "What? What do you mean?" I said, walking over to the fence's control panel and giving the technician a thumbs up. "I'm a little busy right now. They're testing the new perimeter defenses. You should hear the sound this thing makes when they flip the switch. It's awesome." I paused, letting him absorb it. "Listen, Mark. It sounds like you're in the middle of a total dumpster fire. Sucks to be you. Good luck with all that." I hung up. The final sound that came through the speaker before the line went dead was not a word. It was a screech of pure, unadulterated rage and despair. It sounded like a wild animal caught in a trap, one that had just realized the hunter wasn't coming to set it free, but to wear its skin as a coat. I took a deep breath of the mountain air. It had never smelled so sweet. His life was imploding. Fired, facing a lawsuit from his former employer, and probably an investigation by his new, quote, business partners at the rival company. In a few weeks, his car would be repossessed. His credit would be shot. He was, to use the technical term, royally FC-ked. My life, meanwhile, was a non-stop highlight reel. The moat was full. The electric fence was live. The foundation for the massive, reinforced concrete wall was being poured by a crew that thought they were building a retaining wall for a rich guy's terraced vineyard. My network of ghost warehouses was still funneling an absurd amount of supplies into my dimensional space. I had enough Wagyu beef to survive a zombie apocalypse in style, and enough ammunition to start a small war. The world stage was also setting the mood perfectly. The news was no longer just talking about freak weather. They were calling it a global supply chain collapse. A typhoon in the South China Sea had wiped out a dozen major shipping ports. Brazil's coffee bean crop had failed due to a sudden frost. The price of gasoline was spiking daily. People were starting to get genuinely scared. Online forums were filled with panicky threads about stocking up on canned goods and bottled water. They were about 4 months too late and about 1,000,000 tons short. That evening, a new notification pinged on my surveillance feed. It wasn't from Mark's apartment. It was a social media alert I'd set up for Jessica. She'd just posted a new picture on her Instagram. It was a selfie, pouting prettily, with a caption that was pure, calculated gold. Sometimes you realize you've been putting all your energy into a project with no future. Time to cut your losses and invest in something with real potential. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag know your worth. I didn't need to be a genius to decode that. Mark, the now unemployed lawsuit magnate, was the, quote, project with no future. And the something with real potential? Well, a mysterious, freshly minted lottery winner who had just conveniently ghosted his old life certainly fit the bill. A cold smile spread across my face. The rat was leaving the sinking ship, and she thought she was swimming toward a life raft. She had no idea she was swimming right into the shark's mouth. Let her come. I was getting bored of just ruining Mark's life. It was time to play with them both. 3 months. 12 weeks. The countdown timer in my head was ticking loud enough to be a metronome for the end of the world. Out here in Montana, the construction was 90% complete. The concrete for the 5-meter-high inner wall was cured, a beautiful, brutalist gray ring of defiance. The watchtowers stood like sentinels at the 4 cardinal points. My sanctuary wasn't just a place anymore. It was a statement, a middle finger to the coming apocalypse. While the news anchors were having on-air panic attacks about the first major acid rain event that had just turned half of the Midwest's farmland into a toxic mud pit, my phone buzzed with a notification that was, in its own way, just as toxic. A text from Jessica. Hey stranger, winking face. In your neck of the woods, thought I'd pop by. Heard you left the city. The winky face was the cherry on top of the cringe sundae. I could practically smell the desperation through the screen. She'd finally done it. Cut the dead weight that was Mark, and was now making her move on the lottery winner. Her timing was, as always, pathetically predictable. My internal monologue was just a loop of dry laughter. In my neck of the woods? This wasn't a casual drop-by. Montana is a big state. To find my specific unlisted off-grid property meant she'd done some serious digging, or more likely, browbeaten a near-suicidal Mark into giving her the address I'd once mentioned in passing. The parasite was looking for a new host. I texted back a single word, address, followed by the GPS coordinates to my front gate. Let her come. The entertainment value alone was worth the gasoline she'd burn. An hour later, a ridiculously flashy white convertible, the kind that screams, I have terrible credit, crawled up my long gravel driveway. She got out, wearing a flowing white dress and sunglasses the size of dinner plates. She looked like she was arriving for a wine tasting in Napa Valley, not a survival compound at the edge of civilization. She took off the glasses and her eyes went wide, scanning the 50-foot-deep alligator moat, currently alligator-free but still imposing, the 15-foot-high electrified fence, and the monolithic concrete wall beyond it. Her jaw was doing a slow-motion unhinge, but she tried to play it cool when I remotely buzzed the gate open. Wow, Ethan, she said, her voice a little too high-pitched as she walked toward me. This is minimalist, I grunted in response. I was wearing grease-stained overalls and a t-shirt. I had been personally overseeing Maya Chen, my new head of engineering, as we calibrated the backup diesel generators. My hands were black with grime. The contrast between us was comical. She looked like an ad for a perfume nobody buys. I looked like I'd just changed the oil on a tank. And I was the one holding all the cards. Security is a hassle, huh? She purred, trying to sound casual as she eyed the warning signs on the fence. Worried about thieves? Just keeping the coyotes out, I said with a straight face. Come on, tour starts here. I led her past the first line of defense. Her expensive sandals were not designed for gravel, and I enjoyed the slight wobble in her step. We entered the main courtyard, a massive space of packed earth and concrete. It was designed to be a kill zone, but to her, it probably just looked like a rich guy's unfinished landscaping project. So this is what winning the lottery gets you, she breathed, gesturing vaguely at the reinforced stone farmhouse and the massive workshop next to it. I knew you were smart, but this is a lot. It's a work in progress, I said, leading her not to the main house, but to one of the smaller outbuildings. I unlocked a heavy steel door. Gotta have a place to store supplies, right? The supply chain is a total mess these days. I flicked on the lights. Before her stood my pantry. It was a single, climate-controlled walk-in storage unit, about the size of a small apartment. It was a complete joke compared to the continent of supplies in my dimensional space, but to her, it was a treasure trove. The shelves were lined with a curated selection of goods designed to boggle the mind of a normie. Cases of military-grade MREs sat next to crates of freeze-dried Wagyu steak. Stacks of water filtration systems were piled beside vintage French wines. There were giant wheels of aged Parmesan, 50-pound sacks of gourmet coffee beans, and an entire wall dedicated to medical supplies, from basic bandages to complex surgical kits. Jessica's perfectly manicured mask finally cracked. Her eyes were wide with naked, undisguised greed. She ran a hand over a crate labeled 5.56 millimeters NATO. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is all this, Ethan?" she whispered. "Just some essentials." I shrugged. "You can't get this stuff in stores anymore." The government declared a national food security emergency last week. Riots in Detroit over a bread shortage. It's getting wild out there. I watched her process this. The calculating gears in her brain were spinning so fast I could almost hear them whirring. She saw the supplies. She heard the news. She connected the dots. She saw me not just as a rich guy, but as a lifeline, a king in the coming dark age. Her entire demeanor shifted. The cool, appraising look was gone, replaced by a desperate, cloying sweetness. She moved closer, placing a hand on my arm. Her touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "Ethan," she said, her voice dropping to a husky, intimate tone she probably practiced in the mirror. "I'm so glad I found you. Things with Mark, they're over. It was a mistake. I realized he was just a project with no future. I should have been with you all along. We always had a connection, didn't we?" I looked down at her hand on my grimy overalls. A perfect little white hand, so clean, so soft, so useless. In my last life, this hand had helped Mark hold me down. In my head, I imagined it being gnawed on by a zombie. The thought made me smile, a cold, genuine smile. "That's a shame about Mark," I said, my voice completely flat. I made no move to acknowledge her touch. I just looked her dead in the eye. "It sounds like you need to get your life in order. The weather's getting weird, Jessica. I think you should probably focus on finding a safe place to ride out the storm. Somewhere solid. Basements are good." The smile on her face froze, then melted away. Her eyes flickered with confusion, then humiliation, then a flash of anger. I had not only rejected her pathetic advance, I dismissed her. I'd categorized her with the huddled masses, the unprepared sheep heading for the slaughter. I wasn't offering her a place on the ark. I was telling her to go find her own leaky dinghy. She snatched her hand back as if my arm had suddenly become red hot. "Right. Of course. Just some friendly advice." Her voice was brittle. "Exactly," I said, turning and walking out of the pantry. I didn't wait for her. "Tour's over. I've got work to do." I walked her back to the gate in complete silence. She couldn't get into her car fast enough. But just before she sped away, her eyes darted to the side, toward the massive workshop. The bay door was partially open. Inside, sitting like a sleeping beast, was the crown jewel of my ground transport fleet, a fully refurbished MRAP, a military-grade armored vehicle I bought at a government surplus auction. I'd been tinkering with its engine. Its sand-colored armor and bulletproof glass windows gleamed under the workshop lights. I saw the flicker of recognition and calculation in her eyes. It wasn't just about food and shelter anymore. She'd seen real power, tangible, weaponized power. She sped off down the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust and indignation. I closed and locked the gate behind her. Mission accomplished. The seed of an idea, a very stupid, very dangerous idea, had been planted in her greedy little mind. I went back to the workshop, not to the MRAP, but to a different project. Maya was waiting for me next to a series of heavy crates we'd received that morning from an agricultural equipment supplier in Eastern Europe. "Ready to mount the new scarecrows, boss?" she asked with a grin, handing me a wrench. Inside the crates weren't scarecrows. They were cord-heavy machine guns, complete with remote-controlled servo mounts and advanced targeting sensors. By nightfall, they would be mounted on the 4 watchtowers, fully integrated into my security network. Silent, deadly, and ready to turn any uninvited guests into red mist. Later that night, sitting in my control room, I watched a blip on my screen. It was Jessica's car, stopped at a gas station 20 miles away. My long-range microphone picked up her side of a frantic phone call. "No, you don't understand, Mark. It's not a farm, it's a fortress. Shelves and shelves of food, medicine, and guns, Mark. Lots of guns. But there's something else. Something big, like an army truck, a tank. If we could get that, just that one thing, We wouldn't have to beg anyone for anything ever again. We could take whatever we want. The static crackled, but the message was clear. The leech had found her former host again, not to feed, but to partner in a crime born of desperation and stupidity. They weren't going to ask anymore. They were going to try and take. A wide, predatory grin spread across my face. Let them come, I whispered to the empty room, looking at the 4 live camera feeds from my new automated turrets. I'm getting bored. It's time to play. 2 months to go. 60 days until the black rain. The news was my favorite new comedy show. Cities were basically turning into battle royales over toilet paper and canned beans. The National Guard was deployed in 5 states. The stock market was doing a nosedive that would make a kamikaze pilot proud. And I was sitting in my climate-controlled command center, watching the slow-motion car crash of society with the detached interest of a god watching ants. My biggest problem today was deciding whether to have the Wagyu or the Kobe for dinner. Tough life. Then, my entertainment for the evening arrived. Right on schedule. Boss, we've got movement. Maya's voice crackled over the comms from the workshop. She was supposed to be running diagnostics on the MRAP's thermal imaging, but she was as addicted to the surveillance feeds as I was. Perimeter sensor trip, sector gamma. Looks like a party. I leaned forward, a grin spreading across my face. On the high-definition monitor, a beat-to-hell Ford pickup truck had parked a half-mile down the access road, hidden pathetically behind a small copse of trees. 4 figures got out. My drone, hovering silently at 400 feet, zoomed in. The image was crystal clear. There was Mark, looking twitchy and pale, dressed in a black hoodie like he was some kind of Spec Ops ninja. Beside him, Jessica, wearing impractical-looking combat boots she probably bought an hour ago. And with them, 2 local specimens of mouth-breathing troglodytes. One was built like a refrigerator with a head. The other was a wiry, meth-head-looking dude, with more tattoos than teeth. This was the crack team they'd assembled to take down a fortress. I nearly choked on my coffee. They're coming for the MRAP, I said into my headset, my voice flat with amusement. Jessica probably described it as a literal tank. And these geniuses think they can just hotwire it and drive off into the sunset. Plan as a go? Maya asked a little too eagerly. Let the show begin, I replied, leaning back in my leather chair. Popcorn's on the counter if you want to come up. This is going to be gold. I watched them on the screen, a real-time feed from the drone. They were huddled around the hood of the truck, Mark pointing at a hand-drawn map that was probably as accurate as a weather forecast. The 2 goons were nodding, trying to look tough and professional. It was low-key hilarious. They were like the villains from a direct-to-video action movie. The C-Team. No, the F-Team. My internal monologue was just a running commentary of insults. Look at this idiot, Mark. He probably thinks cutting a fence is the pinnacle of tactical infiltration. And Jessica. Poor, dumb Jessica. She actually believes this is her ticket to being the queen of the apocalypse, instead of a future zombie chow party platter. They started their approach, moving through the woods with all the stealth of a herd of elephants. They snapped every twig, crunched every leaf. I could track their progress by sound alone, even without the drone. They reached the outer fence, the 15-foot-high electrified barrier that was my first line of defense. The refrigerator-sized goon pulled out a massive pair of bolt cutters. He's gonna get a little surprise, Maya giggled, now standing behind me with a bowl of ridiculously buttery popcorn. The goon smirked, positioned the cutters, and squeezed. The moment the steel jaws bit into the chain link, the circuit completed. It wasn't a lethal charge. That would be too messy and not nearly as funny. It was a 10_000 volt, low amperage shock. Just enough to feel like being kicked by a mule made of pure lightning. The big guy's body went rigid. His eyes bulged, his hair stood on end, and he let out a strangled yelp that sounded like a dying goat. The bolt cutters flew out of his hands as every muscle in his body convulsed, and he dropped to the ground, twitching and smoking slightly. The other 3 stared in shock. The wiry goon poked his spasming partner with his foot. Dude, you okay? Mark and Jessica were already panicking. I thought you said he was a rich tech nerd. Jessica hissed at Mark. You didn't say anything about an electric fence. How was I supposed to know? Mark squeaked back, his ninja act completely falling apart. But my system had already registered the cut. As per my programming, the fence power redirected, leaving the cut section safe to pass. After a few minutes of terrified whispers and prodding their fried friend back to his feet, they realized this. Their confidence, fragile as it was, returned. They thought they'd beaten the system. See? It just shorted out, the wiry one said, puffing out his chest. They peeled back the fence and slipped through, dragging the still-dazed giant with them. They were now in the alligator moat zone, the 50-foot wide kill box between the outer fence and the main concrete wall. Okay, phase 2, I said to Maya, pressing a large, friendly-looking red button on my console. Engage party foam. From hidden nozzles embedded in the ground, a thick, pink, glittery foam began to spray out with the force of a fire hose. It wasn't just foam. It was a fast-expanding, super-sticky polymer I'd commissioned from a chemical R&D firm under the guise of novelty party supplies. Chaos erupted. The 4 of them were instantly coated. They slipped, they slid, they fell over each other. The foam was like bubblegum mixed with superglue. The more they struggled, the more stuck they got. The wiry goon tried to wipe it off his face and just ended up gluing his hand to his cheek. Mark was flailing around like a drowning man, his black hoodie now a fabulous shade of sparkly pink. Jessica let out a shriek that could shatter glass when the goo got in her hair. The big guy just sort of stood there, looking completely bewildered, now resembling a giant, angry wad of cotton candy. The glitter was a nice touch, boss, Maya said through a mouthful of popcorn. I aim to please, I replied, zooming in on Jessica's horrified face. Let's add some mood lighting. I flipped another switch. A dozen stadium-grade floodlights burst to life, bathing the entire area in brilliant, merciless light. They froze like deer in headlights, blinking stupidly, covered head to toe in sticky pink glitter. And then came the grand finale. The audio deterrent. I didn't use a standard siren. That's for amateurs. I used a custom-made sound file, a looping track of a baby crying, Justin Bieber's Baby, and the sound of nails on a chalkboard, all layered on top of each other and blasted at 130 decibels from speakers that could make your teeth rattle. It was an auditory crime against humanity. Their will to fight, to steal, to do anything other than curl up in a ball and pray for death, evaporated instantly. They were blind, deafened, and stuck. Checkmate. I let them stew in their sparkly, noisy hell for a good 10 minutes before cutting the sound and lights. I gave them another 5 minutes of pure, humiliating silence before Maya and I strolled out of the main house. I was still in my overalls. Maya was still holding her popcorn bowl. We walked up to the edge of the moat and looked down at them. They looked up, their faces a mixture of terror, shame, and goop. Well, 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 I said, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. Look what the cat dragged in. Or, in this case, what my foam trap caught. Mark's jaw worked, but no sound came out. His eyes were wide with a terror that was deeply satisfying to see. He was finally understanding the chasm between us. He wasn't dealing with his old doormat friend. He was dealing with a monster he couldn't comprehend. I focused on Jessica. She was trying to peel a glob of foam off her cheek, her expensive manicure ruined. Her face was a mask of pure hatred. Ethan, you bastard! Me? The bastard? I laughed. A real, honest laugh. You bring these clowns to my home to rob me, to threaten me, and I'm the bastard? The logic is, wow. Just, wow. By the way, this is all being recorded in 4K. I'm thinking of uploading it to YouTube with the title, World's Dumbest Heist, should go viral. The color drained from their faces. I turned to the 2 goons. As for you 2, you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your short, miserable lives in my private jail. Or you can forget you ever saw this place and disappear. Get in your truck and drive until you run out of gas, then keep walking. The wiry one started nodding so fast I thought his head would fall off. The big one just grunted in agreement. I pressed a button on my watch. A small section of the outer fence hissed open. Gate's over there. Don't let it hit you on the way out. They scrambled, slipping and sliding in the foam, helping each other get free and bolting for the exit without a second glance back. They didn't even ask for their pay. Smart move. That just left the star couple, Mark and Jessica. They were still stuck, looking up at me like rats in a trap. What about us? Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Oh, I'm not letting you go, I said, my smile turning cold. The police are unreliable these days. And besides, I feel like this is a teachable moment. A chance for you two to really reflect on your life choices. I looked over at Maya. Maya, prepare guest rooms C and D in the basement. And bring out the decontamination hoses. I don't want this glittery crap staining my concrete. Maya grinned. The high-pressure ones, boss? The highest, I confirmed. Mark and Jessica looked at each other in confusion, then dawning horror. They didn't know what decontamination hoses were, but they could tell from my tone it wasn't going to be a spa treatment. As Maya went to fetch the equipment, I squatted down at the edge of the moat, looking them right in the eyes. "You wanted to get inside my fortress so badly," I said softly, the amusement gone from my voice, replaced by something flat and heavy. "Congratulations, you made it." 59 days until doomsday. The air outside was already starting to smell like fear and bad decisions. As Maya manhandled the thick industrial-grade hoses, I watched from the edge of the moat, feeling the same kind of satisfaction you get from power washing a disgustingly dirty patio. Except my patio was a kill box, and the dirt was my two-faced ex-best friend and his equally trashy girlfriend. "The high-pressure ones, boss?" Maya had asked with a grin that was pure mischief. "The highest," I had confirmed. The water jets hit them with the force of a physical blow. The sticky, glittery pink polymer dissolved instantly under the chemical agent mixed in with the water, but the force of the spray was the real punishment. Mark went down like a sack of potatoes, tumbling and rolling in the muddy water that was once pink foam. Jessica let out a noise that was less a human scream and more the sound of a steam pipe bursting, a high-pitched shriek of fury and shock as the water plastered her hair to her skull and nearly tore her designer jacket to shreds. It was over in less than a minute. They were left shivering, soaked to the bone, stripped of their dignity and their sparkly pink coating. The floodlights were still on them, painting them as the miserable, pathetic stars of their own private train wreck. "All right, party's over," I called down. "Guest suites are ready." Maya, ever the professional, had already brought the restraints. Not chains, that's too medieval. Zip ties, the heavy-duty law enforcement kind. Clean, efficient, humiliating. We frog-marched the two shivering rats down into the basement. The basement wasn't a dungeon. It was worse. It was a sterile, brightly lit, white-walled series of rooms that felt like a laboratory's holding cells. I had them sit on two plain metal chairs, bolted to the floor in the center of what I called my debriefing room. Their wet clothes were already starting to make the climate-controlled air feel clammy. "Now for the main event," I said, pulling up a rolling office chair and sitting opposite them. I tapped a remote and a huge 8K screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a recording from a hidden camera I'd planted in Mark's car weeks ago. The audio was perfect. On screen, Jessica was practically vibrating with greed. "He's got a goddamn armored truck, Mark, and he lives on a huge compound. That tech nerd is sitting on a gold mine. Food, fuel, everything we'll need. We just have to take it." Mark, the spineless weasel, looked nervous. "I don't know, Jess. It's Ethan. He's changed." "He's a pushover," she snapped. "He's always been a pushover. You just need to grow a pair. We get those two local guys. We go in, we take what's ours. He won't even fight back." I paused the video on a close-up of Jessica's snarling face, her expression a perfect portrait of avarice and contempt. I looked at the real Jessica, who was now as white as the walls around her. Mark refused to meet my eyes, staring at his shoes like they held the answers to the universe. "A pushover?" I mused, tapping my chin. "That's how you saw me. A walking wallet, and then a walking supply depot. Your ticket to a comfortable apocalypse." I leaned forward, my voice dropping. "The pathetic thing is, you're not even good at being villains. You brought two meth heads with bolt cutters to a gunfight. That's not just stupid, it's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for you." Jessica's fear was finally being overtaken by her rage. "You son of a bitch! You spied on us!" "Of course I did," I said, looking at her like she was a bug. "You were planning on robbing and probably killing me. Did you expect me to just trust you on a handshake?" My God, the entitlement is off the charts. I turned my attention to Mark. He flinched. "And you?" "My best friend since 3rd grade. All it took was 5 years of hell in my memories, and a few sweet nothings from this harpy to turn you into a backstabbing little snake. You didn't even hesitate, did you?" He looked up, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Ethan, we were desperate." "Don't," I said, my voice like ice. "Don't you dare use that word with me. You have no idea what desperation is. Not yet." I stood up and paced for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air. This was the part one had replayed in my head 1,000 times. The payoff. "So, here we are," I began, stopping in front of them. "You're guilty of trespassing, conspiracy to commit armed robbery. I've got you on 4K video, audio, the works. The local sheriff might be overwhelmed, but I have a feeling he'd make time for a case this neatly gift-wrapped. You'd be locked up long before the world truly goes to hell. And inside, when it happens, you'll be food. Canned meat for the desperate. The last bit of color drained from their faces. Jail, right now, was a death sentence. But, I said, and their heads snapped up, clinging to that single word. I'm a forgiving guy. I believe in second chances. I believe in personal growth. So I'm going to offer you a choice. A way out. I walked over to a metal cabinet and opened it. I took out 2 items, a 3-foot length of steel pipe and a smartphone. I placed them on a metal table between them. Choice A, I said, gesturing to the screen. I send this entire video package to the authorities. You take your chances with the justice system. Bye-bye, Felicia. Choice B, I continued, picking up the pipe and feeling its weight, is a team-building exercise. A test of your commitment to each other, your bond. I looked Mark dead in the eye. You, Mark, will take this pipe, and you will break one of Jessica's legs. A clean break. Tibia or fibula, your choice. Nothing life-threatening, but definitely debilitating. A choked sound came out of Jessica's throat. Mark's jaw dropped. And you, Jessica, I continued, turning to her, will film the entire thing on this phone. Close up. I want to see it happen. I want to hear it. Their expressions were a beautiful cocktail of horror and disbelief. What? Why? Mark stammered. Because it's poetic, I said with a shrug. In my previous life, you two worked together to betray me for your own survival. You were a team. Now I want to see that teamwork in action again. I want to see you inflict pain on each other for your own selfish gain. One of you needs to accept a world of hurt, and the other needs to be the one to cause it, all so you can both walk free. It's a beautiful, twisted little test of character, don't you think? You're insane, Jessica screamed, her voice echoing in the sterile room. Says the woman who planned to rob her ex-boyfriend with a pair of local thugs, I shot back. My sanity isn't the issue here. Your choice is. I set a timer on my watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. If you don't choose, I choose for you, and I'm picking option A. Clock's ticking. I leaned back against the wall, crossed my arms, and watched. And so it began. The dumbest, most predictable episode of Survivor ever filmed. He's bluffing, Jessica hissed at Mark. He wouldn't. Look at him, Jess. Does he look like he's bluffing? Mark shot back, his voice cracking with panic. He built this fortress. He has electrified fences and glitter foam. He's not the same guy. So you're actually considering it? You would break my leg, you coward. What choice do we have? Go to jail and die? The arguments grew more frantic, more desperate. The blame shifted. The insults flew. It was everything I dreamed of. Their unbreakable bond was dissolving in real time, corroded by self-preservation. 2 minutes, I said calmly. That's what broke them. Mark looked at the pipe, then at Jessica, then at the pipe again. The calculation was happening right there, behind his terrified eyes. His freedom versus her pain. It wasn't even a close contest. I'm sorry, Jess, he whispered, standing up and grabbing the pipe. His hands were shaking. No! Mark! No! Don't you touch me! Mark! Her pleas turned to shrieks. Pick up the phone, Jessica, I ordered, my voice leaving no room for argument. Or we're done here. Sobbing, her face a mess of tears and mascara, she fumbled for the phone. She aimed it at her own leg, her hand trembling so badly the image must have been a blur. Mark stood over her. He was crying now, fat tears of self-pity rolling down his cheeks. I have to. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He raised the pipe. Jessica squeezed her eyes shut, a stream of curses and sobs pouring from her mouth. He swung. The sound wasn't loud. It was a dull, wet, sickening thump followed by a sharp, unmistakable crack. Jessica's scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't just pain. It was the sound of ultimate betrayal, a shriek of pure, distilled hatred that clawed at the walls. Mark dropped the pipe as if it were red hot and stumbled back, looking at what he'd done. He looked horrified, not at her pain, but at his own action, at the monster he'd just proven himself to be. I walked over, took the phone from Jessica's limp hand, and reviewed the footage. It was shaky, but it was clear. The act was recorded. My new leverage. I deleted the old video of their conspiracy. I didn't need it anymore. This new one, this recording of them destroying each other, was so much more valuable. I tossed a small, military-grade first aid kit onto the floor between them. It had splints, bandages, and high-grade painkillers. Here, for your troubles. I turned to Mark. You're free to go. Then to Jessica, who was cradling her shattered leg and glaring at Mark with an expression that promised murder. Well, you're free to be carried out. He broke your leg. It's only fair he carries you. I walked to the door and keyed it open. The main gate will open for you. Get off my property. If I ever see either of you again, I won't give you a choice. This video, I said, holding up the phone, goes wide. TikTok, YouTube, the local news. The whole world will see what you did to each other to save your own skins. Mark, without a word, hauled us screaming, cursing Jessica into his arms, and limped out of my basement and out of my life. The seed of hatred I had planted between them was now a fully grown, venomous tree. They would tear each other apart long before the apocalypse got the chance. Mission accomplished. I walked back up to the command center, the faint sounds of Jessica's cursing fading as they reached the gate. Maya was there, supervising a construction crew that was installing the new hydraulic steel doors over the main entrance. Massive sheets of bulletproof polycarbonate were being fitted into the windows. Trash taken out, boss? She asked, not looking up from her tablet, which showed the schematics for the bunker excavation. Recycled, I said, pouring myself a glass of 20-year-old scotch. They imploded beautifully. The news was on one of the monitors. A news anchor was talking about martial law being declared in California and Texas. Riots over food and fuel were an hourly occurrence. The world was sliding down a razor blade into chaos. 59 days. I took a long drink of my scotch. The fortress was secure. My primary enemies were broken. But watching them turn on each other had sparked a new thought. Solitude was safe, but it was also a weakness. Trapping myself in here alone, or just with Maya, was a long-term losing strategy. I needed people. Not allies of convenience, but loyal, skilled assets who owed me their lives. People who wouldn't break. In my past life, there were a few sparks of light in the 5 years of darkness. A grizzled soldier who taught me how to shoot. A plucky engineer who could fix anything. And a doctor. A brilliant doctor who saved me from a gut wound with nothing but a bottle of vodka and a sewing needle. I pulled up a new screen on my console. The secure, encrypted browser I used for my deep dive searches. The satisfaction from my revenge was already fading, replaced by the cold calculus of survival. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Search. Dr. Eris Thorne, Chicago General Hospital, head of virology. It was time to go recruiting. 30 days until the world gets a hard reset. The hangover from the 20-year-old scotch was a pleasant, dull throb behind my eyes, a souvenir from celebrating the glorious self-destruction of Mark and Jessica. That chapter was closed, sealed, and chucked into the incinerator. But watching them implode wasn't the end goal. It was just the appetizer. Solitude is a fortress, but a fortress with only one defender is a tomb waiting to happen. It was time to build a team, my team. First on the list, Dr. Eris Thorne. In the timeline that no longer existed, she was a folk hero among the Chicago survivors. A genius virologist and trauma surgeon who could patch a sucking chest wound with a plastic bag and sheer willpower. She'd saved my life once, pulling me back from the brink after a scavenger group decided I looked better with a few extra holes in my gut. I owed her one. More importantly, her skills were a non-negotiable asset for the new world order I planned to build. A king needs a royal physician, after all. My fingers danced across the keyboard of my command center console, the multiple monitors painting my face in a cold, electronic glow. Accessing Chicago General Hospital's internal servers wasn't even a challenge. With the capital I'd acquired, buying a few terabytes of cutting-edge, government-grade hacking exploits was as easy as ordering pizza. In less than 5 minutes, I was reading the digital diary of the entire hospital administration. And boy, was it a dumpster fire. It turned out Dr. Thorne was in deep trouble. She was facing a disciplinary hearing, accused of leaking proprietary research and causing a crisis of confidence in the hospital's leadership. It was a classic corporate takedown, orchestrated by the hospital's chief administrator, a slick-haired parasite named Henderson, and his 2 cronies on the board. My internal monologue kicked in, dripping with sarcasm. Oh, a crisis of confidence? You mean the crisis that happens when a brilliant doctor notices the head honcho is selling off a third of the hospital's pandemic readiness supplies on the black market? Digging deeper was a joke. Henderson wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a greedy idiot. I found the encrypted emails, the offshore bank account statements, even security footage from a loading dock camera he'd forgotten about, showing him personally overseeing the loading of pallets of N95 masks, ventilators, and broad-spectrum antibiotics onto an unmarked truck. The guy was treating the impending apocalypse like a Black Friday sale. Dr. Thorne had apparently stumbled onto it, raised a quiet alarm internally, and was now being systematically crucified for her troubles. In my past life, they succeeded. She was fired, discredited, and left to fend for herself when the black rain fell. A tragic waste of talent. Not this time. Not on my watch. I spent the next hour packaging the evidence. It was a work of art. I didn't just collect the data. I curated it into a multimedia presentation of pure, unadulterated career death. I embedded the damning video files into a PDF of the bank statements. I created a timeline with hyperlinks to every incriminating email. I even found Henderson's Grindr profile and threw it in an appendix for flavor. I called the completed file the Henderson Protocol. Then, I initiated the digital carpet bombing. First, an anonymous, heavily encrypted email containing the Henderson Protocol went to every single member of the hospital's board of directors, excluding Henderson's two pet stooges. Subject line: your cancer is in the corner office. Second, the same package went to a famously aggressive investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune, a woman who would sell her own grandmother for a Pulitzer. Subject line: your next big story. You're welcome. Third, for good measure, I uploaded a sanitized version, minus the Grindr stuff, I'm not a complete monster, to a dozen different subreddits dedicated to medical whistleblowing and corporate malfeasance. It would go viral before Henderson even finished his morning latte. Checkmate. I leaned back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and switched the monitor to a live feed I'd hacked from a news channel's chopper cam that often hovered over downtown Chicago. Then I put on some coffee and waited for the show to start. It took less than 3 hours. The news broke like a flash flood. The reporter, bless her bloodthirsty heart, didn't even wait for the ink to dry. She ran the story online, and it exploded. By noon, news vans were swarming Chicago General like vultures on a fresh kill. The hospital's switchboard melted. The board of directors, scrambling to save their own asses, convened an emergency meeting that probably lasted all of 10 minutes. The payoff was beautiful. Around 2 p.m., I watched on my live feed as 2 unmarked police cars pulled up to the main entrance. A few minutes later, 3 figures in expensive suits were frog-marched out in handcuffs. Henderson was the star. The slick hair was a mess, his face was the color of spoiled milk, and he looked like a man who'd just been told his winning lottery ticket had been used as toilet paper. His 2 little buddies looked even worse. That's the face of a rat who knows his co-conspirator is going to sing like a canary to get a plea deal. It was glorious. A perfect, clean, arm's-length takedown. No mess, no fuss, just pure satisfying results. The world outside might be rotting, but in my own little bubble, I was the janitor, and it was time to take out the trash. Later that afternoon, the hospital officially released a statement. Dr. Eris Thorne was not only cleared of all charges, but she was publicly lauded for her unwavering integrity. A formal apology was issued. They probably offered her a raise. I let her enjoy the victory for a few hours. Then, from a completely different untraceable server, I sent her a single, simple email. To a.thorne@chicagogen.med. From a benefactor. Subject: the real storm is coming. Dr. Thorne. Justice was served today. But don't mistake a battle for the war. The world you know is about to change in ways you cannot imagine. The chaos you see on the news is a gentle rain before the hurricane. Your talents are wasted in a system that would try to destroy you. You belong somewhere you can do real work. Somewhere safe. Prepare yourself. Someone will come for you. Don't try to trace this. You won't succeed. I hit send. Let her wonder. Let her feel that prickle on the back of her neck, the sense that a force beyond her comprehension was watching over her. A little bit of mystery and fear was a great foundation for future loyalty. Down in the sanctuary's newly excavated sublevel, the work continued at a frantic pace. The living quarters were done, a series of comfortable, well-lit suites that felt more like a luxury hotel than a bunker. The main storage vault, a cavernous, climate-controlled space, was already half full and organized with the ruthlessness of a librarian with OCD. Now, Maya was overseeing the installation of the crown jewels, the med bay, and the workshop. "You're sure about the second biocontainment lab, boss?" she'd asked, tapping on her ruggedized tablet. "This stuff costs more than a Lambo." "A Lambo can't help you if you get bitten by an evolved zombie, Maya," I'd replied. "I want a level 4 clean room and a separate quarantine ward. Get the best gene sequencer on the market, a full-body MRI, and 3 surgical robots. Spare no expense." She just whistled and keyed in the orders. The medbay wasn't just going to be a clinic. It was going to be a world-class research facility. Eris Thorne would walk in and think she died and gone to nerd heaven. Next to it, Maya's workshop was taking shape, a sprawling space filled with CNC mills, 3D printers that could work with metal and carbon fiber, and enough tools to strip down and rebuild a main battle tank. The sanctuary wasn't just a shelter, it was becoming a self-contained, high-tech kingdom. On the big screen in the command center, between news reports of food riots in Miami and the military locking down Seattle, another, quieter story was being buried. A consortium of international meteorologists and atmospheric scientists held a press conference. They spoke with worried faces about an unprecedented global atmospheric phenomenon. Satellites had detected a strange, uniform layer of particulates gathering in the upper atmosphere across the entire planet. We project a worldwide precipitation event in approximately 4 weeks, one of the scientists said, looking deeply uncomfortable. The chemical and biological makeup of these particulates is unknown. We are advising extreme caution. The world, of course, paid no attention. They were too busy fighting over the last C-cell batteries at Walmart. It was the final, ignored warning. The starter's pistol for the end of the world. 29 days. I pulled up a new file on my console. Time for the next piece of the puzzle. Eris was the healer. Now I needed the shield. My fingers typed a new search query into the encrypted network. Search. Chloe Jensen, 1st Recon Battalion USMC. Status discharged. Last known location, near Billings, Montana. The system pinged. She was close. Very close. The best damn sharpshooter I had ever seen. In this life or the last. It was time to make another house call. 7 days until the global rage quit. The air itself was starting to feel weird. Like diet soda left open overnight weird. Flat. Wrong. On my main monitor, a constellation of hacked satellite feeds and drone cameras showed me the story the news wasn't telling. It wasn't just riots anymore. It was the system cracking at the seams. And nowhere was the cracking louder than at Malmstrom Air Force Base, just a few hours' drive from my little slice of heaven in Montana. Time to poach my shield. Chloe Jensen, 1st Recon, USMC. A woman who could probably headshot a mosquito with a slingshot from a moving vehicle. In my last life, I'd seen her and her squad hold a collapsed overpass against a horde for 3 days straight, with nothing but their service rifles, and a disturbing amount of pure, unadulterated grit. They were legends. And like most legends in the apocalypse, they died a stupid, pointless death, betrayed by the very command structure they'd sworn to protect. A major somebody or other had designated their position non-essential for extraction, to save fuel for his own getaway jet. Classic middle management cowardice. Not this time, pal. This time, she was getting a better offer. Hacking the base's outbound logistics was child's play. The entire military was in a state of controlled panic, shuffling assets, evacuating non-essential personnel, and generally running around like headless chickens. Their cybersecurity was an afterthought. I found the manifest for a private logistics contractor, a company I now technically owned through a series of shell corporations I'd set up last month. With a few keystrokes, I added a special delivery to their next run. The package was addressed to Corporal Chloe Jensen. Inside was a care package from a secret admirer. Item 1. A brand new military-grade Iridium 9575. A satellite phone, fully charged, subscription paid for the next 10 years. Item 2. A heavily customized Glock 19. Stippled grip, flared magwell, a Trigicon RMR red dot sight, and a threaded barrel with a suppressor. On the slide, a laser-engraved image of a hawk's eye. Subtle. I also included 5 extra magazines, preloaded with high-grade hollow points. Item 3. A laminated card with a set of GPS coordinates, the location of the sanctuary's main gate. Item 4. A simple, single-line note, printed in a stark military font. Back quote. When, not if, they leave you to die, call me. Back quote. I watched on a pirated CCTV feed as a harried logistics guy dropped the package at her barracks. Chloe picked it up, a confused frown on her face. She was lean, coiled energy, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She opened it, her expression shifting from confusion to suspicion, then to a kind of wary intrigue. She hefted the Glock, her movements fluid and practiced. She checked the action, her thumb flicking the mag release with the ease of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Her CO, a pompous-looking major with a weak chin and a bad haircut, walked by and made some dumb joke about her having a rich boyfriend. She just gave him a flat, unreadable look and tucked the gear into her go bag. A true professional. She didn't trust it, but she was smart enough not to throw away good hardware. The wait was agonizingly short. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. A massive civilian riot, fueled by fear and shortages, erupted outside the base's main gate. It wasn't a real threat to the base itself, but it was the perfect excuse for a coward to make a cowardly decision. I watched on my drone feed, munching on some perfectly preserved popcorn from my endless supply, as the evacuation order was given. Convoys of trucks and armored vehicles started rolling out the back gates, a frantic exodus. Chloe's squad, Reaper 3, was tasked with holding the line at the main gate perimeter, providing a delaying action. I nearly choked on my popcorn. Delaying action was officer speak for, "You guys are the speed bump." On the command channel I was listening to, I could hear Chloe's calm, professional voice requesting an extraction window. Reaper 3 to command, perimeter is becoming unstable. Requesting sit representative on our evac. Static. Command, this is Reaper 3, do you copy? More static. Then, Major Weak Chin's voice came through, not on the squad channel, but on the main command net, thinking no one else was listening. Is Gate 1's comms traffic isolated? Yes, sir, another voice replied. Good. All assets are to maintain radio silence with Reaper 3. There are sacrificial lambs. Get us the hell out of here. The sheer, unadulterated scumbaggery was breathtaking. You could almost admire its purity. I zoomed in with my drone's camera. I could see the moment the realization dawned on Chloe's face. The last of the evacuation trucks sped off into the distance, leaving a plume of dust. The main gate behind her squad slammed shut with a grim finality. The rioters, sensing the shift, surged forward. Her small squad of 6 was now an island in a sea of desperation and violence. Trapped, abandoned, perfect. This was the moment. The crucible. The point where the old world's loyalty shattered, and my new world's loyalty could be forged. I let them sweat for another 5 minutes, trading disciplined bursts of fire with the increasingly bold rioters. I watched one of her men go down with a nasty leg injury. I saw the grim set of her jaw as she realized they wouldn't last another hour. Then, from my command center desk, I dialed the number for the satellite phone. In the middle of that chaotic firefight, a strange, tinny ringtone cut through the noise. Chloe's head snapped around. She fumbled in her go-bag, pulling out the phone. She stared at it as if it were an alien artifact. On the screen, the caller ID simply read, "future." She answered, her voice tight with disbelief and desperation. Who is this? The guy with the helicopter, I said, my voice calm and even. I swiveled my chair to face another monitor, which showed Maya getting our heavily modified Black Hawk chopper, the Nighthawk, spun up on the helipad. That's the simplified version anyway. How's the view from the cheap seats, Corporal? There was a moment of stunned silence, punctuated by the crack of a rifle shot in the background. You knew this was going to happen? It wasn't a question. I don't waste time on hypotheticals, I replied, leaning back. Your CO is a textbook coward who just secured his spot on my personal shit list. Your government is a sinking ship. I'm building an ark. I have a spot for a wolf to guard the sheep. The coordinates are on the card I gave you. You're 6 o'clock. 2 clicks out. There's a rocky outcropping. Get your squad there in 20 minutes. I'll pick you up. My squad? Her voice was laced with shock. You want my whole squad? I'm not in the business of recruiting people who leave their own behind, I said simply. That's my competitor's business model. 20 minutes, Jensen. The clock is ticking. I hung up. Switching back to the drone feed was like watching a masterclass in small unit tactics. Chloe didn't hesitate. She barked orders, a plan instantly forming. They laid down suppressive fire, popped smoke, and began a fighting withdrawal, dragging their injured man with them. They moved with a desperate efficiency that the rioters couldn't match. They were no longer just defending. They were moving toward a goal, toward hope. While they were running for their lives, I took a moment to appreciate my own setup. The sanctuary was fully operational. Down in the hydroponics bay, rows of lush green lettuce, tomatoes, and herbs were sprouting under the glow of full-spectrum LEDs. The water filtration system was quietly turning river water into something purer than anything you could buy in a bottle. The armories were stocked, categorized, and inventoried. My command center was a fortress of information. The hum of servers and cooling fans a symphony of absolute control. I was a king in his castle, watching the world burn on a 4K screen, while preparing to welcome the first of my royal guard. The contrast was delicious. While the official, taxpayer-funded United States military was cannibalizing itself, abandoning its best and brightest, I was building a new order based on merit and loyalty. I wasn't saving the world. I was headhunting its best assets before the company went bankrupt for good. 19 minutes later, my Nighthawks swooped down toward the rocky outcropping. I saw them. 6 dust-covered, exhausted figures formed up in a defensive circle. As the chopper's landing skids touched down, Chloe helped her injured teammate aboard, her eyes scanning the dark interior of the bird. She saw me sitting in one of the command seats, watching her on a monitor. Our eyes met through the camera lens. I gave a slight nod. She got it. She understood. The old world, with its broken promises and gutless leaders, was behind her. In front of her was something new, something powerful, something that knew her value, and had reached through time and chaos to claim it. As we lifted off, leaving the base and the riots behind, a news alert flashed on one of my screens. A global announcement from the WHO and every major scientific body on the planet. Unprecedented atmospheric anomaly, the headline screamed. Global precipitation event imminent. All citizens urged to remain indoors. Exposure to unknown particulates could pose a severe biological hazard. The sky, which had been a sickly gray all week, was now beginning to darken, not like a storm, but like a light bulb slowly being unscrewed. A deep, unnatural twilight was falling at 3 in the afternoon. Chloe's voice came over the internal comms, her eyes glued to the window. What the hell is happening to the sky? I looked out the armored glass, a cold, familiar smile touching my lips. I saw the first one. A single, black drop sliding down the window, leaving a greasy, dark streak. Then another. And another. Welcome to day 0, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The great filter is here. Day 0. T+1 minute. The Nighthawk's rotors spun down with a final, satisfying whump 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 as the hangar doors, thick enough to stop a tank round, slid shut behind us. They sealed with a pneumatic hiss that cut off the outside world completely. One moment, we were in a swirling twilight nightmare of greasy black rain. The next, we were bathed in the crisp, clean LED light of my garage/helipad. The air inside didn't just feel clean, it smelled clean. The scent of filtered oxygen, concrete, and absolute uncompromising victory. Chloe Jensen and her 5 remaining squad mates stumbled out of the chopper, looking like they'd just crawled out of a 9-layer dip of hell. They were covered in dust and grime, their faces tight with exhaustion and adrenaline. One guy was being half-carried, his leg wrapped in a bloody field dressing. They stood in a tight, defensive cluster in the middle of the cavernous space, their rifles still held at a low ready, eyes darting everywhere. They were taking in the racks of tools, the spare tires for my armored truck, the backup generator the size of a small car, and the sealed blast door that led deeper into the facility. Welcome to the sanctuary, I announced, stepping out of the chopper and not even bothering to look at them. I walked over to a wall-mounted panel and slapped a big, friendly red button. Decontamination sequence initiated. Don't breathe too deep for the next 60 seconds, unless you enjoy the taste of aerosolized viricide. A fine mist sprayed down from nozzles in the ceiling, covering them and the Nighthawk. They flinched, but Chloe, ever the professional, just barked, "Hold steady!" I watched them on a nearby monitor, already heading through the blast door. I didn't have time for a grand tour. This wasn't a timeshare pitch. Keep up, I called over my shoulder. Infirmary is first stop. Then you get the world's shortest orientation. I led them through a short, sterile white hallway to the medbay. As we walked, they got their first real glimpse of my kingdom. Through thick polycarbonate windows, they could see into the main armory. Their jaws collectively dropped. It wasn't a gun rack, it was a goddamn library of firepower. Rows upon rows of assault rifles, sniper systems, shotguns, and sidearms, all meticulously organized. Crates of ammo were stacked to the ceiling. Grenades, claymores, body armor. The works. It made their base armory look like a poorly curated pawn shop. Is that a minigun? One of them whispered, his voice full of religious awe. It's for a vehicle mount. We'll get to an inventory check later, I said, not breaking stride. Dr. Thorne will meet you in the infirmary. She'll patch up your boy and screen the rest of you. Standard procedure. I left them at the infirmary door, where a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor was already waiting. That was Eris Thorne, a virology genius I'd extracted from a collapsing hospital a month ago. Her greeting was as warm as a coroner's handshake. On the gurney now. The rest of you strip. I need to check for exposure. Chloe gave me one last look, a complex mix of suspicion, gratitude, and utter disbelief. I just gave her a slight nod and pointed toward the end of the hall. Command center. Find me there when you're done playing dress up. I didn't wait. The main event was starting, and I had front row seats. My command center was the heart of the entire facility, and my personal throne room. It was a massive open-plan space that combined a military-grade command hub with a billionaire's penthouse lounge. One entire wall was a seamless bank of 8K monitors, currently showing a mosaic of death and destruction from every corner of the globe. Hacked news feeds, public webcams, my own network of covert drones. I saw it all. In the center of the room was a sunken living area with plush leather couches, and off to one side, a gleaming chrome and marble kitchen that would make a Michelin star chef weep with joy. I settled into my command chair, a high-backed leather throne that probably cost more than their entire squad's annual salary, and took a sip of the ice-cold soda I'd pulled from a Sub-Zero fridge. The show was just getting good. New York. A live feed from Times Square. The black rain was coming down hard. The massive digital billboards were still trying to sell cars and perfume, while the streets below were pure chaos. People were screaming, clawing at their own skin as the dark, oily droplets made contact. Their faces were blistering, their bodies convulsing. The audio feed was a nightmare, a cacophony of shrieks that sounded less human and more like rusty machinery being torn apart. Then, the feed sputtered and died. One screen went black. London. A BBC camera pointing at a panicked crowd, trying to cram into an underground station. The same story. The rain fell, the screams rose, and then static. Another screen went black. Tokyo, Moscow, Sao Paulo. One by one, the lights of the old world were going out. The global internet infrastructure, the broadcast networks, the very things that held civilization together, were dissolving in real time. It was like watching a patient flatline on a dozen heart monitors at once. My systems, however, were purring. A small, polite notification popped up on a side monitor. Atmospheric analysis. Complete. External contaminant. Complex airborne biological agent with corrosive and mutagenic properties. Viral load. Catastrophic. Sanctuary air system status. Hermes IV filtration. Operating at 100.2% efficiency. Air quality. Pristine. Zero particulate intrusion. I smirked. Good. My money was well spent. Chloe and her team entered the command center a few minutes later, now wearing fresh sets of black tactical gear I'd left for them. Their injured compatriot was stable. According to a ping from Eris, they stood silently behind my chair, their professional composure, a thin mask over their shock as they stared at the wall of dying worlds. This is it then, Chloe said, her voice flat. It's really happening. Happened? I corrected her, not taking my eyes off a feed from Chicago, my old stomping grounds. The camera was overlooking a familiar, grimy alleyway. The world you knew signed off about 10 minutes ago. This is just the epilogue. We watched for another 5 minutes as the last vestiges of order evaporated. The screams of pain began to change. They became less sharp, more guttural. The convulsing bodies on the streets began to still, only to rise again moments later with a jerky, unnatural motion. Their eyes were blank, their mouths open in a silent, endless snarl. The great filter was brutally efficient. The changeover from human to that was horrifyingly fast. I yawned. The novelty was wearing off. Right. I'm starving, I announced, swiveling my chair around. The squad looked at me like I'd just started speaking in tongues. Anybody else? They just stared, dumbfounded. Suit yourselves. More for me. I walked over to the kitchen area, the polished marble floor cool under my feet. From a stainless steel, glass-fronted refrigerator, I retrieved a thick, obscenely marbled slab of a 5 Wagyu beef. Next, I went to a temperature-controlled wine rack built into the wall and pulled out a bottle. Chateau Margaux, 1982. A vintage that cost more than a decent used car in the old world. I turned on the professional-grade gas range. The blue flame ignited with a soft whoosh. While the cast-iron skillet heated up, I hit a button on the control panel. From hidden speakers throughout the room, the thunderous, defiant opening notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony blasted out, so crisp and clear, you could hear the rosin on the violin bows. The squad physically flinched at the sudden onslaught of high culture. I tossed the steak onto the sizzling hot pan. The sound was glorious. A rich, crackling hiss that cut through the music and the distant, muffled groans from the dead world outside. The aroma of searing, high-grade beef fat filled the air. It was the smell of pure, unadulterated success. I plated the steak, perfectly medium rare, sliced it, and sat down at the huge oak dining table that faced the wall of screens. I poured a generous glass of the deep red wine. Outside my 5-meter-thick concrete walls, humanity was tearing itself apart, dying in agony and rising as mindless monsters. Billions were suffering the worst fate imaginable. And I was enjoying a meal that a king would kill for, set to a classical masterpiece. I took a bite. The fat melted on my tongue, a wave of flavor so intense it was practically a religious experience. I took a sip of the wine. It was smooth, complex, with notes of who gives a damn. It tasted expensive. It tasted like I had won. This was the ultimate face slap. Not to a single person, but to the entire stupid, short-sighted world that had let itself die. A face slap to fate itself. You thought you could kill me in a grimy alley? I'm back, and I'm eating better than God while I watch your creation burn. Chloe finally found her voice. How can you just sit there and eat? I looked up from my steak, chewing thoughtfully. Because I'm hungry. And because this, I said, gesturing with my fork at the steak, the wine, the room, the screens, is the whole point. This is the reward for not being a naive idiot. I planned. They panicked. I'm eating steak. They're eating each other. See? Cause and effect. The universe is, in its own way, perfectly balanced. She had no response to that. Her and her team just stood there, caught in the bizarre cross-current between the apocalyptic horror on the screens and the scene of decadent tranquility at my table. They were soldiers, trained for the end of the world. But they weren't trained for this. This level of detached, C-suite psycho-preparation was beyond their comprehension. As Beethoven's final triumphant chords faded, a new sound began to dominate the audio feeds from outside. The human screaming had almost entirely stopped. In its place was a low, constant, mindless moaning. The collective groan of a planet of the dead. The zombies were now the dominant species. Then, another sound cut through it all. Bang. 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 It wasn't the dull, rhythmic thud of a zombie bumping into something. It was sharp, frantic, human. It was coming from the main gate. On my command console, an alert popped up. Proximity alert. Main gate. Unidentified life forms. I sighed. A long, suffering sigh of a man whose five-star dinner was being interrupted by peasants. I tapped a few keys, and the central monitor switched to the high-definition camera overlooking the main entrance. There they were. A small, pathetic group of people, my former neighbors from the quaint suburban development 50 miles down the road. I recognized the face of Mr. Henderson, the former president of the Homeowners Association. A man who once wrote me a sternly worded letter because my lawn was a quarter-inch too long. His face was pale, streaked with the black gunk of the rain. His J.Crew polo shirt was torn. He was hammering on my impenetrable gate with his soft, manicured fists. Behind him, his wife was sobbing, and a few other familiar faces from the neighborhood block party were huddled together, looking terrified. "Help!" Mr. Henderson's voice came through the external microphone, tinny and pathetic. "Please, we know you're in there. Ethan, we saw the helicopter. You have to let us in. For the love of God, be a decent human being." I took another slow, deliberate sip of my wine, swirling the glass as I watched his desperate, tear-streaked face on my giant screen. My squad was looking at me, their expressions unreadable. They were waiting to see what their new commander would do. Would he show mercy? I leaned back in my chair, a cold, lazy smile spreading across my face. Decent human being? I mused to myself, loud enough for them to hear. Sorry, buddy. That guy died in an alley in Chicago 5 years ago. I looked at Chloe. Her eyes were like chips of ice. Get your team ready, I said, my voice dropping the playful tone and becoming pure, cold business. The first wave of morons has arrived. Day 1 of the apocalypse. The morons were officially at the gate. I didn't even bother getting up. My steak was getting cold, and that was a bigger tragedy than whatever sob story was unfolding outside. On the 8K wall display, Bill Henderson, president of the must be exactly 2.5 inches high Homeowners Association, was performing his best rendition of a drowning man. His face was a mess of tears, snot, and the oily black gunk from the rain. It was, not gonna lie, a pretty cringe look for him. Ethan, I know you're in there, you bastard. His voice, filtered through the high-end external mics, sounded like a needy chihuahua. We're your neighbors. You have to help us. Chloe and her squad of hardened Marines were standing stiffly behind me, their faces unreadable. They'd just seen the world end on my TV wall, and now they were watching the first episode of the post-apocalyptic reality show, Suburbanites Gone Wild. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity. What's the rich psycho going to do now? Was probably the thought bubble over all their heads. They were soldiers, trained to see civilians as people to be protected. They hadn't yet learned the most important lesson of the apocalypse. Most civilians are just zombies who haven't been bitten yet. I took a slow, deliberate bite of my Wagyu. It was still perfect. The flavor exploded in my mouth. I chewed, swallowed, and took a sip of my obscenely expensive wine. Chloe, I said, not turning around. On the console to your left, there's a big green button labeled External PA. Do me a favor and push it. She hesitated for a split second, then her training kicked in. She moved with crisp efficiency, her boots silent on the polished concrete floor. She pressed the button. A small green light blinked on. Testing, I said into the command chair's built-in mic. My voice, smooth and amplified, boomed out over the main gate, momentarily silencing Bill's frantic pounding. On the screen, I saw him and his little group of refugees flinch. Bill Henderson, is that you? Wow, you look like crap. A flicker of hope ignited in the man's pathetic eyes. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought his appeals to our shared zip code meant something. Ethan, Yes, thank God, he cried, pressing his face closer to the camera. You have to let us in. The roads are blocked. Things are out there. We have women and children. He gestured to his sobbing wife, and a few other familiar faces from the cul-de-sac, all of them looking suitably terrified and miserable. It was a solid performance. 7/10. Ah, yes, the women and children, I mused, swirling my wine. The classic argument. Tell me, Bill, does being a, quote, decent human being, as you so eloquently put it a minute ago, involve sharing? Is that where you're going with this? Yes, exactly. He latched onto it like a lifeline. We're a community. You have so much in there. You have to share. It's your responsibility. The word responsibility hung in the air. The other neighbors nodded eagerly, their faces pleading. The moral pressure was on. The squad behind me shifted their weight. This was the moment. I smirked. You know, Bill, you're absolutely right. It's important for a community to be on the same page. I swiveled in my chair to face the console and tapped a few keys. Let me just pull up the minutes from the last community meeting I attended. I have a recording. I think everyone should hear it to, get aligned. I minimized the live feed of Bill's stupid face and pulled up a file named Local Bar Audio Surveillance 3 weeks ago .mp3. I had bugged the local watering hole, the place where all these clowns went to complain about their wives and property taxes. It was a treasure trove of petty grievances and unfiltered opinions. Best $100 I ever spent on spy gear. I cranked the volume on the external PA system to max. First, there was the clinking of glasses and shitty bar music. Then, Bill Henderson's voice, thick with cheap beer and self-importance. Less than audio playback, greater than, and then the psycho, Ethan Cole, has the balls to fly a goddamn helicopter over my house. Woke up my poodle. No respect. Guy's a paranoid freak. Another voice, which I recognized as Bob from down the street, chimed in. Less than audio playback, greater than, no kidding, building those crazy walls. My wife says he thinks the world is ending. What a nut job. Probably some kind of doomsday prepper weirdo. Then, the gold. Bill speaking again. Less than audio play bold, greater than. I'll tell you what. If things ever do go south, like a big earthquake or something, we should form a little neighborhood committee. Our first order of business will be to go over there and teach Mr. Moneybags a lesson about community. He's got all that space, all those resources. He has a duty to share with the rest of us, whether he likes it or not. We'll make him share. The recording ended. I let the silence hang in the air for a solid 10 seconds, thick and heavy with hypocrisy. On the screen, Bill Henderson's face had gone from pale to a blotchy, furious red. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The other neighbors looked at him, then at the gate, their faces a mixture of shame and horror. Their self-righteous little play had been nuked from orbit. Their masks weren't just torn off, they were vaporized. So, Bill, I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity, is that the community you were talking about? The one where you and your buddies plan to come teach me a lesson and take my stuff? Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. That did it. The last thread of his composure snapped. You son of a bitch! He shrieked, all pretense of the civilized man gone. He was pure, distilled rage and entitlement now. You were spying on US, you fucking freak. Fuck you. You think you can hide in there forever? We'll get in. We'll tear this fucking gate down and take everything you have, you selfish prick. Ah, there it was. The real you. So much for, quote, being a decent human being. I yawned and muted the external mic. Show's over, folks, I announced to my silent squad. I swiveled my chair back to face the screens. It was all so predictable. So boring. While Bill and his gang of losers started throwing rocks at the gate, a truly pathetic gesture, like tadpoles attacking a battleship, I relaxed. Next to my command chair, a small, sleek robot whirred to life. It was shaped vaguely like a cat, with a glossy black finish and glowing blue optical sensors. Its primary function was to be a mobile diagnostic tool and environmental scanner, but I programmed a pet mode into it. It trotted over and rubbed its metallic head against my leg, emitting a soft, synthesized purr. I scratched it behind its ears, which were actually just Wi-Fi antennas. Inside, I was surrounded by climate-controlled, filtered air, cutting-edge technology, and the lingering, delicious smell of cooked beef. Outside, in the filth and the drizzle, these morons were having a full-blown meltdown because their plan to bully a paranoid freak into feeding them had backfired spectacularly. The sheer contrast was hilarious. It was the ultimate how it started versus how it's going meme. Watching their pathetic assault on my multi-layered defenses did bring up a valid point, though. The electric fence and solid gate were great, but they were passive. They just sat there, A continuous assault, even a weak one, was annoying. A drain on the power reserves. Note to self, I thought, as the robot cat purred louder. Need to upgrade the perimeter defenses. Something more proactive. A Tier 1 deterrent. Something that says, go away, in a language that even idiots can understand. Maybe turrets that fire concentrated pepper spray or beanbag rounds. An automated system for dealing with pests. A new alert chimed on my console, overriding the proximity alert from the gate. This one was different. Perimeter sensor grid, biosignatures detected. Sector 4, non-human. Count, 359. Well, I said, leaning forward. Looks like the party's about to get some uninvited guests. I toggled the camera feeds, switching from the main gate to the cameras covering the tree line 50 yards behind Bill's group. There they were, the first products of the Great Filter. They shambled out of the dark woods, jerky and uncoordinated. One was a woman still in her pajamas, her jaw hanging slack. Another was a mailman, his bag still slung over his shoulder. They weren't fast, but they were relentless, drawn by the sound of Bill's screaming, and the rhythmic thud of rocks hitting my gate. Oh, this is gonna be good, I chuckled, pulling up the thermal imaging overlay. The zombies were cold, blue-gray. Bill and his crew were bright, glowing orange blobs of panic. They were a walking, screaming buffet. They hadn't noticed yet. They were still too focused on their hatred for me. Bill was trying to climb the gate, which was hilariously pointless since the top was sizzling with enough voltage to flash fry a bull. Chloe stepped forward. Sir, she said, her voice tight. Those people are about to become a valuable lesson in cause and effect, I finished for her, not taking my eyes off the screen. Cause. They made a lot of stupid, loud noise. Effect. They attracted the new locals. The first scream wasn't from Bill. It was from his wife. She had finally turned around. Her eyes went wide as she saw the mailman zombie, its face a pallid mask of decay, lurching toward them. The panic was instantaneous and absolute. All thoughts of breaking into my fortress vanished, replaced by primal terror. They scattered like roaches when the lights come on. But it was too late. The zombies, slow but steady, were closing the distance. Bob from down the street tripped and fell, and was on the ground for less than a second, before two of the things were on him. His shrieks were loud, wet, and blessedly short. The chaos at my gate was now a full-blown horror movie. Bill Henderson, screaming his head off, finally realized climbing was a dead end. He scrambled back down and ran. Not toward his wife, who was fumbling with the door of their minivan, but toward a rusty-looking construction pickup truck that one of the other neighbors had driven. He threw open the driver's side door and jumped in, frantically trying to get the key in the ignition. Another neighbor, a guy the first think was named Steve, piled into the passenger seat. Bill, what are you doing? His wife screamed from the minivan. The gate! Bill screamed back, his face a mask of insane desperation. It's our only chance! We'll ram it! Now that was an epic fail of a plan. That gate was reinforced with steel rebar and set in a 5-foot-deep concrete foundation. Hitting it with that rust bucket would be like punching a mountain. But desperate people don't do math. The truck's old diesel engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. Its headlights cut through the gloomy twilight, pinning my main gate in their glare. Inside my command center, it was all perfectly silent, except for the synthesized purr of my robot cat. I leaned back in my chair, picked up the last slice of my steak with my fingers, and popped it into my mouth. This is going to be so satisfying. On the screen, the pickup truck revved its engine, the sound a promise of glorious, self-inflicted destruction. The ancient diesel engine screamed like a banshee as the pickup truck, a monument to rust and questionable life choices, tore across the 50 yards of asphalt separating it from my front gate. On my command center's main screen, I could see Bill Henderson's face in glorious 8K. It was a masterpiece of ugly. His eyes were wide with a suicidal fervor, his mouth a tight line of pure, unadulterated stupidity. The guy next to him, Steve something or other, was just holding on for dear life, his expression screaming. I've made a terrible mistake. My robot cat, Unit 734, nudged my ankle, emitting another pre-programmed purr. I gave its antenna ear a little scratch. Don't worry, buddy, I murmured, my eyes glued to the screen. Natural selection is a beautiful thing to watch. Behind me, Chloe and her team of professional badasses remained silent, but I could feel the tension radiating off them. They were soldiers, trained for firefights and tactical insertions. This was different. This was watching two morons in a death trap pickup try to solve their problems by ramming them. It was the apocalypse's version of a Darwin Award nomination. The truck closed the distance. 40 yards. 30. 20. Bill let out a triumphant roar, a sound that probably ripped his throat raw. He actually thought this was going to work. He thought his sheer, boneheaded determination could overcome $500,000 of reinforced concrete, hardened steel, and paranoid engineering. It was almost cute. 10 yards. I didn't even flinch. I just took another sip of my wine. It was a 2012 Screaming Eagle Cabernet Sauvignon. Tasted like victory. Clack. The sound wasn't loud, but it was decisive. It was the sound of a plan coming together. 40 feet in front of my gate, a section of the asphalt split open. A thick cylindrical steel bollard, painted a cheerful safety yellow, shot up from the ground with the force of a hydraulic piston. It was a simple, elegant piece of engineering I'd had installed for just this occasion. I called it the Moron Stopper. The pickup truck, moving at maybe 40 miles per hour, met the Moron Stopper head-on. The result was less a crash and more a physics lesson. The truck didn't crumple. It impaled itself. The bollard punched straight through the engine block, lifting the front of the vehicle a full 3 feet into the air. The sound of tortured metal was profoundly satisfying, like the world's biggest can opener biting into a can of moron-flavored Spam. The truck's momentum vanished instantly. Its back wheels lifted off the ground for a second before the whole flaming, smoking wreck slammed back down, pinned like a butterfly in a collector's display. Silence. The engine was dead. The triumphant roar in Bill's throat had turned into a strangled gurgle. On the screen, I could see steam and black smoke pouring from under the mangled hood. Well, that was anticlimactic, I said to the room at large. Before the day's survivors could even process what had just happened, Phase 2 of my welcome wagon protocol kicked in. On either side of the main gate, 2 sleek, armored panels slid open on the 5-meter-high concrete walls. From within, 2 automated turrets glided out on articulated arms. They were beautiful, custom-built machines, each sporting a high-caliber machine gun and a secondary, non-lethal deterrent system. They whirred to life, their optical sensors glowing a menacing red. 2 ruby-red laser dots appeared, dancing across the panicked faces of Bill's little gang of wannabe revolutionaries who were still frozen near the tree line. 1 dot settled comfortably right between Bill's eyes. I leaned forward and pressed the green button for the external PA system again. My voice, calm and amplified, washed over the scene of destruction. Bill, Steve, I trust your little joyride is over. They both flinched as if they'd been tasered. This, I continued, my voice taking on a harder edge, is your first and final warning. The next person to take a single step towards my property will be used for target practice. My defenses will not differentiate between an arm, a leg, or a head. They will simply neutralize the threat. Do you understand? The pure, crystal-clear terror that washed over their faces was better than any movie. The last vestiges of their self-righteous anger evaporated, replaced by the primal, animalistic fear of imminent death. They weren't a community anymore. They weren't neighbors. They were prey. And they had just realized they'd pissed off the apex predator. Bill's wife, who had been trying to coax a child out of the back of her minivan, let out a shriek that could curdle milk. That broke the spell. The group shattered. They didn't walk, they scrambled. They fled, trampling over each other in a mad dash back towards the relative safety of the zombie-infested suburbs. They left the still-smoking truck, the minivan with its door wide open, and whatever dignity they had left behind. In 30 seconds, the area in front of my gate was empty, save for the pinned truck and a few discarded shoes. I clicked off the PA system and leaned back, a wide smile spreading across my face. Show's over, folks. Please exit through the gift shop. Chloe finally stepped forward. Sir, that was... She paused, searching for the right word. Efficient? I supplied. Impressive, she corrected, her face a mask of professionalism, but I could see a flicker of something else in her eyes. Awe. Respect. The realization that she'd signed up to work for someone who was not just rich, but operating on a completely different level of preparedness. The hydraulic bollard and automated sentries, they weren't in the initial schematics you showed me. Last-minute addition, I said nonchalantly, waving a hand. I figured a passive defense is good, but a proactive go-the-hell-away system is better. It discourages loitering. I swiveled my chair to face her and her team. They were all standing at attention, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. This is lesson number 2 of the new world. An overwhelming, decisive show of force saves time, energy, and ammunition. It makes people think twice. The ones who can still think, anyway. I pointed a thumb at the screen, where the abandoned minivan was now being swarmed by a few shambling figures emerging from the woods. As for the ones who can't, well, the world has a new janitorial service for that. The next few days were a blur of hyper-productive activity inside the sanctuary, set against the soundtrack of a dying world outside. The internet and global communications were the first to go, flickering and dying as power grids failed and infrastructure collapsed. Local news channels broadcasted horrifying, grainy footage of riots, fires, and military units being overrun before they too went dark. The age of information was over. The age of rumors and fear had begun. For us, it was business as usual, but better. Maya Grease Monkey Chen, the prepper engineer I'd recruited a month ago, was in heaven. She treated my compound like a giant Lego set. "The bollard system is solid, boss," she chirped over the comms from her workshop, the sound of welding in the background. "But a single point of failure is still a point of failure. I can reinforce the base and add 2 more on a staggered deployment. Triple redundancy. And about that moat you mentioned, I'd already sent her the plans. A 10-foot deep, 20-foot wide trench dug by the automated excavation drone that had cost me a cool $2 million. In a week, we'd have a legitimate moat encircling the inner wall." I was even considering her half-joking suggestion to stock it with genetically engineered piranhas. A bit cliché, but the classics are classics for a reason. Dr. Eris Thorne, my resident medical genius, had converted one of the underground levels into a state-of-the-art biolab and infirmary. She and her small team were analyzing samples of the black rain I had collected, working to understand the Z virus. Her job was to keep us healthy and figure out what made our new cannibalistic neighbors tick. Chloe and her squad, my Hawkeyes, ran the security patrol and training. They turned a section of the outdoor grounds into a firing range and combat course. Every day, they drilled, maintained the arsenal, and ran surveillance drones over the surrounding 50 miles of wilderness. They were the shield. And me? I was the brain. The king in his castle. I managed the logistics, monitored the outside world via my satellite network, and fine-tuned our long-term survival strategy. While the remnants of humanity were fighting over cans of expired tuna and toilet paper, I was cross-referencing my inventory of Wagyu beef and planning our menu for the next 5 years. The contrast was a drug, and I was perpetually high on it. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. This wasn't an apocalypse. It was a hostile takeover, and I was the new management. It was on day 5, during a routine system check, that it happened. I was enjoying a freshly brewed espresso from beans I'd liberated from a gourmet supplier in Seattle, while monitoring the satellite feeds. Most of the grid was dark, but a few military and corporate SATs were still operational, and I had backdoors into all of them. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on my main console, overriding everything else. It wasn't a perimeter breach or a system diagnostic. It was a specific, encrypted signal. A signal I had set up myself. Priority alert, beacon Quicksilver activated. Encrypted ping received. Location, Street Mary's Hospital downtown sector. My blood went cold for a fraction of a second. Quicksilver. That was my code name for the emergency beacon I had given to Dr. Eris Thorne 2 months ago. I knew the hospital where she worked would become a death trap. I had tried to convince her to leave early, to join me at the safe location, but her damn sense of duty wouldn't let her abandon her patients. She thought I was a paranoid lunatic. A rich, charming, but ultimately crazy client who kept talking about the end of the world. So I gave her the beacon. A small, platinum device disguised as a keychain. "If I'm right," I told her, "and you find yourself in a situation you absolutely cannot talk, bargain, or run your way out of, press the button. It has its own power source and an independent satellite uplink. I'll get the signal, and I will come." She had smiled, a sad, placating smile, and tucked it into her lab coat pocket, probably to humor me. But now, she had pressed it. On the screen, a high-resolution satellite map zoomed in on the hospital. Thermal imaging flared to life. The building was a mess. Sections were on fire. The heat signatures inside were chaotic. Hundreds of cold, blue-gray smudges. Zombies, shuffling around. But in the east wing, on the 5th floor, in what looked like a reinforced laboratory, there was a small cluster of bright, warm orange blobs. Living people, maybe a dozen of them. And surrounding the entire floor, flooding the stairwells and hallways below, was a sea of blue. They were trapped. Completely and utterly surrounded. I leaned forward, my fingers dancing across the console, bringing up the comm system. "Chloe, Maya, report to the command center. Now." My espresso sat forgotten on the console. The game had just changed. The time for passive defense and enjoying the show was over. It was time to go on the offensive. Day 5 of the new world, and it was already time for the first DLC expansion, the rescue mission. The moment my voice crackled over the comms, Chloe and Maya were in the command center in under 60 seconds. They didn't ask questions. They just appeared, Chloe in her tactical gear looking like she was born in it, Maya wiping grease from her cheek with the back of her hand, a smudge that only made her look more focused. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I pointed a single finger at the main screen, where the thermal satellite image of St. Mary's Hospital was a horrifying canvas of blue and orange. This is Dr. Eris Thorne. Our asset. She's on the 5th floor, East Wing. This, I made a sweeping gesture over the sea of cold blue signatures flooding the lower floors, is the local welcome committee. We're going in, we're grabbing her, we're coming home. This is not a humanitarian mission. We don't save a random nurse. We don't rescue a crying child. We extract the asset. Any questions? Maya squinted at the screen, a low whistle escaping her lips. That's a whole lot of nope right there, boss. The roads downtown will be a parking lot of death, which is why we're not taking the Prius, I said, a predatory grin spreading across my face. I spun my chair around to face them. Maya, get the red hair ready. Full tank, ammo loaded. Chloe, you're with me. Pack your go bag. We leave in 10. A flicker of something dark and excited flashed in Chloe's eyes. This was the work she was made for. Target location clear, sir. Maya gave a 2-fingered salute. You got it. My baby's been dying for a joyride. Just be gentle with the paint job. It's custom. 10 minutes. In the world before, you couldn't even get a pizza delivered that fast. In my world, it was an eternity. I went to the armory, a climate-controlled room that smelled of gun oil and potential violence. My personal suit was hanging there, waiting for me. It wasn't just Kevlar. It was a custom-made tactical shell of layered composites and lightweight alloy, something that wouldn't look out of place in a sci-fi blockbuster. It made me look less like a survivor and more like the final boss. I slotted a high-capacity magazine into my customized Honey Badger PDW, its integrated suppressor making it the perfect tool for close-quarters arguments. A heavily modified Glock 19 went into the thigh holster. Backup mags, flashbangs, breaching charges, and a combat knife sharp enough to shave a ghost, all clicked into place on my vest. I was a walking, talking violation of the Geneva Convention, and it felt fantastic. When I reached the main vehicle bay, a gargantuan hangar that could house a small army, the red hair was already purring. And I do mean purring. It was the sound of a 15-liter diesel engine that had been tuned by a demon. The red hair was my masterpiece. It started life as a military-grade MRAP mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle. Then I gave it to Maya with an unlimited budget. The result was a monster. She had reinforced the hull with ceramic composite armor that could shrug off a .50 caliber round. The windows were replaced with 5-inch thick ballistic glass. The tires were solid rubber run flats that you could drive on for 100 miles after they'd been shot to hell. But the piece de resistance was the front. I'd had a custom-forged V-plow mounted to the chassis, a 20-foot wide wedge of hardened steel designed for one purpose: plowing. Not snow. Zombies. It was the apocalypse's most aggressive snowplow. Perched on top, in a remote-controlled turret that Maya had wired directly to a joystick next to the driver's seat, was an M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun. It wasn't a truck. It was a 20-ton statement of intent. A rolling fortress that screamed, "Your apocalypse is boring me." Chloe was already in the passenger seat, running a final check on her own assault rifle. She gave me a sharp nod. I climbed into the driver's command throne, the hydraulics hissing as the armored door slammed shut, sealing us in. The outside world went silent, replaced by the low thrum of the engine and the cool hum of the life support systems. "Maya, open the gate," I said into my headset. "Enjoy the ride, boss. Try not to scratch the paint." The main gate of the sanctuary, a slab of steel and concrete that could stop a tank, slid sideways. Beyond it lay the new world. Beyond it lay the horde. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The red hair didn't roll forward. It lunged. The torque was immense, throwing me back into the plush leather seat. We roared out of the sanctuary, past the moron stopper bollard and the smoking wreck of Bill's pickup truck, a monument to his terminal stupidity that I'd left as a warning. The first few zombies were shambling on the access road. They were probably the early birds who had followed the sound of Bill's failed assault. They turned as they heard us coming, their jaws slack, their movements pathetically slow. They were like deer caught in headlights, if the deer were already dead, and the headlights were attached to an extinction-level event on wheels. I didn't slow down. I didn't swerve. The sound of the first impact was a dull, wet thump that I felt more through the floorboards than heard. Then another. And another. I glanced at the forward-facing camera feed on my dashboard display. The V-plow was doing its job beautifully, tossing the walking corpses aside like they were soggy bundles of laundry. Some went under the wheels, which resulted in a series of sickening, satisfying crunches. Organic speed bumps. That's all they were. "Status report," I said, my voice flat. My hands were steady on the wheel, my eyes scanning the road ahead. All green. No threats detected. The roadkill isn't damaging the plow, Chloe replied, her gaze fixed on the turret controls screen, her hand resting on the joystick. We hit the highway. This was where the real party started. The interstate was a graveyard of cars, abandoned in a panic. And between the cars, a river of the dead. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. For a normal survivor, this would be an impassable death trap. A nightmare vision of the end. For me, it was a bowling alley, and I had the perfect ball. Chloe, I said calmly, clear a path. With pleasure, sir. The turret on top of the truck whirred to life. The heavy thump-thump-thump of the M2 Browning echoed in the cabin, a deep, resonant bass note in the symphony of our dominance. On screen, I saw the .50 calories rounds do their work. They didn't just kill zombies, they erased them. Heads exploded in pink mist, torsos were ripped in half. A single round could tear through 3 or 4 of the shambling morons before stopping. I steered the red hare into the thickest part of the horde, the V-plow acting like the prow of an icebreaker ship carving through a frozen sea. Zombies were thrown 50 feet into the air, pinwheeling grotesquely before splattering on the asphalt. The sheer, overwhelming violence was hypnotic. At one point, we passed a small group of survivors, a family huddled behind the concrete median, their faces pale with terror. They stared at us, their eyes wide with disbelief as we carved a bloody path through the very monsters that had them pinned down. I saw a man, probably the father, take a step out, his hand raised as if to beg for help. I didn't even look at him. My internal monologue was running on pure spite. Look at them. NPCs in the middle of a quest they can't possibly win. Their apocalypse is about scavenging for scraps and praying they don't get eaten. Mine is about optimizing my kill-to-fuel consumption ratio. We are not the same. I even thought I saw one of them mouth the word please, cute. A skill issue on their part, really. New contacts. 2 o'clock? Chloe's voice cut through my thoughts. Looks like a juggernaut class. I glanced at the screen. A new type of zombie. One I remembered from my past life. Bigger, bloated, and much tougher. It was standing its ground in the middle of the highway, pounding its fists on the hood of a police car. A normal vehicle would be stopped dead by this thing. Let's test the new paint job, I muttered. I aimed the red hare straight at it and floored the accelerator again. The engine roared in protest before settling into a deep-throated growl. The juggernaut zombie saw us coming. It let out a silent roar and charged. For a moment, it was like 2 rhinos about to collide. The impact was bone-jarring. A shudder ran through the 20-ton frame of the red hare. The ballistic glass in front of me crazed slightly but held. The juggernaut didn't stand a chance. The V-plow hit it square in the chest, lifting it off its feet and slamming it underneath the truck. The sound of its massive body being ground to paste under our solid rubber tires was immensely gratifying. Plow integrity at 98%, Chloe reported, not a hint of emotion in her voice. Minimal cosmetic damage. Good, I grunted. This little trip was already paying dividends. The red hare was a beast, but even a beast could be improved. I was already mentally designing its successor, the warlord, with heavier armor, flamethrowers, and maybe Maya's piranha stalking system for the moat wasn't such a bad idea after all. Specialized vehicles were the key. A fast attack vehicle, a heavy cargo hauler, maybe even a modified helicopter. The Sanctuary's workshop was about to get very, very busy. We were making incredible time. The 90-minute drive to the city center was cut down to 30. The city itself was a disaster zone. Fires burned unchecked, smoke plummeting into the sky. The sheer number of zombies was staggering. They clogged every street, every alley. The constant background moaning was a low, oppressive hum, the new ambient sound of the world. Approaching target coordinates, Chloe announced, her fingers tapping on a console, bringing up a tactical map of the hospital area. UAV drone deployed. Live feed coming online now. The main screen switched from the forward camera to a top-down aerial view. St. Mary's Hospital. It was an island in a sea of undead. They swarmed the entrances, clawed at the walls, a writhing mass of mindless hunger. And there, on the 5th floor of the East Wing, I saw it. A single window, barricaded with desks and cabinets. Behind the barricade, a faint, flickering light. A flashlight, maybe. The drone's thermal camera zoomed in. The orange blobs were still there. Fewer than before. 10, maybe 9 now. They were cornered, trapped, surrounded by thousands of enemies. For them, it was the end of the line. Their last stand. A hopeless, desperate fight for a few more minutes of life. For me, it was just the start of the mission. I brought the red hair to a halt, a block away, hidden behind a burned-out city bus. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was broken only by the hum of the onboard electronics and the distant, collective moan of the city. "All right," I said, my voice low and cold. "Phase 1 complete. Welcome to the party." Day 5 of the New World, post-inconvenience. Phase 2 was a go. The UAV drone footage painted a grim, if predictable picture on the main console. St. Mary's General was less a hospital and more a zombie all-you-can-eat buffet. The main course was trapped on the 5th floor. My little thermal camera showed a cluster of about 9 warm bodies huddled in what looked like a chief of surgery's office. One of them had to be Dr. Eris Thorne. The other 8 were, in technical terms, meat shields and resource drains. "Well, that's a clown show," I muttered, leaning back in my command throne. My voice was calm, the kind of calm you get when you're playing a video game on easy mode while everyone else is stuck on a permadeath nightmare run. The main entrance is a mosh pit. All lower-level windows are compromised. They're completely boxed in. Beside me, Chloe was a statue of lethal focus. Her eyes flicked between the tactical map and the thermal feed. "No viable ground floor exit. The roof is a possibility, but we don't have aerial extraction capabilities online yet." "Yet," I agreed, a smile playing on my lips. "A problem for future me. Present me enjoys a more direct approach." "Maya," I spoke into my headset, my voice crystal clear over the sanctuary's private network. "You reading this?" Her voice, tinny and laced with static, came back instantly. "Loud and clear, boss. Looks like a real party. You want me to ready the welcoming committee gift?" "Oh, you know it. Patch it through to the red hair's primary sound system. Let's give them a concert." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "A concert, sir?" "The zombies are mindless, Chloe, not deaf. They operate on basic instinct, sight and sound. Right now they're drawn to the faint sounds of life from the 5th floor. We just need to give them a better offer. A headliner they can't refuse." I tapped a few commands onto my console. The red hair system's word to life. "It's showtime." I gunned the engine. The 20-ton MRAP didn't just move. It erupted from behind the burned-out bus, its V-plow already scraping the asphalt. I swung the beast around the block, putting the bulk of the hospital between us and the main horde, and parked directly beneath a different wing. "Hit it, Maya." For a moment, there was silence. Then, the world exploded with sound. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't an alarm. It was a perfectly crisp, high-fidelity, bass-boosted recording of Baby Shark. The sheer brain-melting absurdity of it was a weapon in itself. The song blasted out from the military-grade speakers I'd had Maya install. Speakers capable of projecting sound with enough force to liquefy a man's insides at close range. We were running it at about 50%. Chloe stared at the main screen, her jaw slack for the first time since I'd met her. On the drone feed, the effect was instantaneous and hilarious. The river of undead that had been pressed against the hospital's main entrance paused. Hundreds of heads, in various states of decay, cocked to the side as if trying to process the sonic assault. Then, as one, the horde began to move. It was like watching a tide recede. They shambled, crawled, and shuffled away from the hospital and towards the source of the mind-numbing children's song. It was a pilgrimage of the damned. "My God," Chloe whispered. "It's working." "Never underestimate the power of terrible music," I said, my tone deadpan. It was a beautiful sight. Hundreds, then thousands of them, abandoning their siege to chase a song. Dumb as rocks. A complete skill issue on their part. "All right, that's our window. Let's go get our doctor." I floored it. The red hair roared around the corner, leaving the Pied Piper of the apocalypse to do its work. We came screeching to a halt right in front of the main entrance, which was now blessedly clear of the majority of the horde. Stragglers still milled about, but they were nothing more than a welcome mat. "Chloe, you have the gun," I said, my hands steady on the wheel. "Make us a path." A feral grin spread across her face. "Copy that." The .50 caliber turret on top spun with a satisfying whir. The M2 began its deep percussive song, a far more pleasant tune than the one we'd left playing. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't a fight, it was pest control. The heavy rounds turned the remaining zombies into clouds of red mist and pulverized bone. Chloe was brutally efficient, stitching lines of fire across the plaza, clearing a 50-yard kill zone in under 10 seconds. The ground was instantly repainted in shades of crimson and gray. "Path is clear," she reported, her voice laced with the adrenaline of the hunt. I toggled my comms to an open frequency I'd picked up from the hospital. "This is a rescue broadcast to any survivors in St. Mary's General. You have exactly 90 seconds. Get to the main entrance lobby. I repeat, 90 seconds. We will not wait." I didn't ask for their names. I didn't ask for their status. I gave an order. In this new world, you either followed the strong or you died with the weak. The drone feed showed a flurry of activity in the 5th floor office. The barricade was being torn down with a desperate frenzy. 60 seconds later, the thermal signatures were moving, a frantic conga line of warm bodies sprinting through the darkened corridors. 40 seconds later, the main entrance doors burst open. It was a pathetic sight. A handful of people in torn, blood-stained scrubs and lab coats stumbled out, blinking in the daylight. They looked like ghosts. One of them, a woman with wild black hair tied back in a messy bun, glasses askew, and a determined set to her jaw, was clearly the leader. Dr. Eris Thorne. The asset. The others were just noise. They stared at the red hair, this 20-ton metal god that had appeared out of nowhere, parked in a fresh circle of gore. Their faces were a mixture of terror, confusion, and a dawning, desperate hope. "What? What is that thing?" one of the male doctors stammered, his eyes wide as dinner plates. I hit the external intercom. My voice boomed out, distorted and godlike. "You have 10 seconds to get in the rear transport bay before I get bored and leave. The clock is ticking." That got them moving. They scrambled towards the back of the MRAP, where a heavy ramp had hissed down to meet the ground. Dr. Thorne was at the front, her eyes scanning the vehicle, her sharp intellect clearly trying to process an impossible situation. A true genius. She understood power when she saw it. The others were fumbling, one of them trying to drag a heavy medical bag with him, an absolute NPC move. "Leave the bag, you idiot," I barked over the intercom. "Move!" He dropped it as if it were on fire and scrambled up the ramp. Dr. Thorne was the last one up, her head on a swivel, scanning for threats even as she retreated. A professional. Good. "Ramp is up. All survivors aboard," Chloe confirmed, her eyes still scanning for threats. "Excellent." I slammed the red hair into gear and tore away from the hospital, leaving the distant, idiotic strains of Baby Shark to fade behind us. I didn't even bother to check if any other zombies were coming. It didn't matter. In the back, I could hear the survivors chattering, a high-pitched buzz of relief and disbelief. I switched my comms to the internal transport bay channel. "Report," I said, my voice all business. There was a moment of shuffling, then a woman's voice, steadier than I expected, cut through the noise. "This is Dr. Eris Thorne. Myself and 5 other staff members are secure. 2 have minor injuries, but we are all ambulatory." Who are you?" "I'm the guy who just saved your life. You can call me Ethan. Welcome to the winning team." I cut the channel before she could reply. Pleasantries could wait. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the low thrum of the engine and the occasional, satisfying crunch as we rolled over a stray corpse. We were almost to the highway when Chloe spoke, her voice low. "New contact, drone feed. Looks like a domestic dispute." She patched the feed to my screen. It was a suburban street a few miles from my old neighborhood. A scene of utter desperation. A small group of thugs, armed with baseball bats and crowbars, had a man and a woman cornered against a car. The thugs were laughing, holding up a can of beans like it was a gold bar. The couple was begging. They were starving, dirty, and pathetic. And I knew them. The man on his knees, his face streaked with grime, was Mark, my ex-best friend, the one who held me down. The woman he was trying to protect, her designer clothes now rags, was Jessica, my ex-girlfriend, the one who kissed him after they took my last dose of medicine. RN Jesus was truly smiling on me today. My primary revenge targets, delivered right to my doorstep, gift-wrapped in misery. The lead thug shoved Mark to the ground and kicked him in the ribs. Jessica screamed, a thin, reedy sound. Chloe looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Orders, sir? They're civilians." I watched the screen, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The kind of smile a predator gets when it sees its favorite prey, wounded and helpless. Mark, Jessica, after all this time. They had survived the initial outbreak, only to end up here, groveling for a can of beans at the feet of some low-life street rats. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. This was better than any revenge I could have possibly scripted. "Civilians?" I repeated, my voice a low, amused purr. "No, Chloe. They're not civilians." I turned the wheel of the red hair, the massive vehicle veering off the main road, and onto the suburban street. The thugs looked up, their jeering laughter dying in their throats as they saw the 20-ton apocalypse on wheels bearing down on them. "They're a side quest," I said, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, "and I'm about to get a 5-star rating." The world didn't slow down for a dramatic moment. Physics didn't care about my personal vendetta. The red hare, all 20 tons of American-made get out of my way, slewed onto the suburban street with the grace of a charging rhino. The sound of its tires crushing decades-old asphalt was like the crack of doom. The 5-man welcoming committee, who had been enjoying their power trip over Mark and Jessica, froze mid-kick. Their faces, greasy with the grime of the new world, went from smirking confidence to pants-wetting terror in about half a second. You could practically see their brains glitching out, unable to process what was now taking up their entire field of view. It was an absolute clown show. These guys were street-level trash, the kind of NPCs that only exist to give low-level players some easy XP. And in front of them, on their knees, were my final bosses. Or at least, they used to be. Now they were just pathetic. Mark, my former brother-in-arms, was a wreck. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide, with a mixture of fear from the thugs and sheer disbelief at the mechanical god that had just crashed his pity party. His face was thin, his cheekbones sharp under a layer of dirt. Starvation was a harsh stylist. And next to him, Jessica. Oh, Jessica, the beautiful, ambitious queen of our college campus, the woman I once thought I'd die for. And I did. She was almost unrecognizable. Her golden hair was a matted, greasy mess. Her trendy clothes were ripped and stained. She was clutching a single, dented can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup to her chest, like it was the Holy Grail. She was also kneeling beside Mark, and I noticed one of her legs was bent at an odd angle. A crude splint made of sticks and duct tape barely holding it together. Karma really did have a sense of humor. I let the red hair idle, its deep diesel thrum, the only sound on the dead street. It was a power move, a declaration. I'm here. The rules just changed. The lead thug, a burly guy with a sleeve of terrible prison tattoos, finally found his voice. "Who the hell are you? This is our street." I didn't even dignify him with a look. My focus was entirely on the screen, on the 2 people who defined my second chance, my entire reason for being. Chloe, beside me, was silent. She knew. She didn't know the details, but she understood the look on my face. It was the look of a chef about to plate his masterpiece. Then it happened. The moment I had replayed in my nightmares 1,000 times, but with the roles finally, gloriously reversed. Mark's eyes focused, and a flicker of recognition, followed by a tidal wave of desperate, idiotic hope, washed over his face. "Ethan?" he croaked, his voice raw. "Ethan Cole! Is that you? Oh my God, it's you!" He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the thugs, and started waving his arms like a madman. "Ethan, help us! It's me, Mark, and Jessica! We're here! We're alive! Get us out of here!" Jessica's head snapped up. Her eyes, sunken and haunted, widened. Tears of relief streamed down her filthy cheeks, cutting clean paths through the grime. "Ethan! Thank God! We knew you'd make it! We knew you were a survivor!" The cringe was so powerful it could have generated its own electricity. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it. They weren't just asking for help. They were acting like we were all still pals, like we'd just run into each other at the mall. Complete memory loss, apparently. Or more likely, they assumed I had it. "Orders, sir?" Chloe's voice was a low murmur, a razor's edge in the quiet cab. I took a deep breath, savoring the bouquet of irony. It smelled like victory. "Stay here. Enjoy the show." I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. I hit the button to unseal the door. A hiss of hydraulics and the heavy door swung open. I stepped out, my combat boots crunching on broken glass. The afternoon sun glinted off my clean tactical gear, my well-fed frame, my holstered sidearm. I probably looked like a recruiting poster for the post-apocalypse. I ignored the thugs completely. They took a step back, intimidated by the vehicle, by my calm demeanor. I walked slowly, deliberately, towards Mark and Jessica. I didn't stop until I was 10 feet away, close enough for them to see the cold, dead calm in my eyes. "Ethan, man, you have no idea how good it is to see you," Mark babbled, stumbling forward. "These guys, they were going to kill us for a can of soup. Can you believe that? The world's gone crazy, man. But you have a truck like this. You made it. You can help us, right?" He looked from me to the red hair, his eyes gleaming with greed. He wasn't just seeing a savior. He was seeing an upgrade. A ticket out of the gutter and back into a life of comfort. His comfort, built on my resources. The absolute state of this guy. I let a small, tight smile touch my lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a judge about to pass sentence. Help you? I asked, my voice level and clear. It carried easily in the dead air. You want me to save you? I let the question hang there, twisting in the wind. Their hopeful faces started to falter. A sliver of confusion pierced through their desperate relief. Yeah, man, of course, Mark said a little too quickly. We're friends. We're family. I chuckled, a low, dry, humorless sound. Funny you should mention that. Reminds me of another time, another place. An alley in Chicago. It was snowing. You remember that, don't you, Mark? Mark's face froze. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty gray mask of shock. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Oh, yeah. They remembered. I remember it perfectly, I continued, my voice dropping into a conversational, almost pleasant tone, like I was recounting a funny story at a dinner party. I had a hole in my gut, courtesy of a zombie that got a little too friendly. I was bleeding out on the frozen garbage. And I had 1 dose of military-grade antibiotics. Just 1. The last one. Enough to stop the infection. Enough to give me a fighting chance. I took a step closer. The thugs were watching now, forgotten by their prey, their own small-time drama completely eclipsed by this main event. They were leaning against a broken wall, like they'd bought tickets. You, Mark, I said, pointing a finger at him. You held my arms down. You told me it was for the greater good, that I was too far gone anyway, that you and Jessica had a better chance of surviving. My gaze shifted to her. And you, Jessica, you took the vial from my pocket. You looked me right in the eye. I'll never forget that look. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pity. It was relief. Jessica was shaking her head frantically, tears of a very different kind now streaming down her face. No, it wasn't like that, Ethan. You're mistaken. Wasn't it? I barked, and for the first time, a flash of the old rage burned through my icy calm. You kissed him right after, while I was watching. Then you traded my life, my last chance, to some gang for a single loaf of stale, moldy bread. And you walked away, leaving me for the horde that was shuffling down the alley. I heard you two laughing as you left. Laughing. The silence that followed was absolute. The truth, laid bare, was more brutal than any weapon. Mark and Jessica looked like they'd been physically struck. Their hope didn't just die. It was ripped out, stomped on, and set on fire before their very eyes. They weren't seeing a savior anymore. They were seeing a ghost. A ghost they had created, now returned in a 20-ton chariot of judgment. Mark fell to his knees. Not begging the thugs, begging me. Ethan, please, we were desperate. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, don't do this. A mistake? I echoed, my voice laced with venomous amusement. No, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. You made your choice in that alley. Now I'm making mine. I looked past them, at the lead thug who was watching this soap opera with fascination. I gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that said, I'm done here. They're all yours. His eyes widened, then a slow, ugly grin spread across his face. He understood. I turned my back on them, on their pathetic, blubbering faces, on the memory of their betrayal. It was over. The rage that had fueled me for 5 years in my past life, and 6 months in this one, it didn't vanish in a fiery explosion. It just sublimated. It cooled, hardened, and settled into a core of pure, unshakable certainty. My biggest demon wasn't slain. It was rendered utterly irrelevant. Ethan, no! Wait! Jessica's shriek was a thing of pure animal terror. It was a sound that could strip paint from walls. I didn't slow down. I walked back to the red hair, each step light, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I swung myself back into the driver's seat and sealed the door, plunging the cab back into quiet, air-conditioned comfort. Behind us, the thugs, now emboldened by my clear lack of interest in playing hero, closed in. Their laughter was back, crueler than before. They had their original victims, plus their families who had been cowering behind them, and now they had a story to tell. Chloe looked at me, her expression a blank slate, but I could see the understanding in her eyes. Good side quest? 5 stars, I said, starting the engine. The roar of the diesel drowned out the renewed screams. Would betray again! I put the red hair in gear and drove away without a single glance in the rearview mirror. The survivors in the back were deathly silent. They had just received their first, most important lesson about their new leader. I save who I want to save. Mercy is not on the menu. We drove for another hour, leaving the shattered suburbs behind and climbing into the winding mountain roads of Montana. The air grew cleaner, the ruins of civilization fewer and farther between. Finally, we rounded a bend and it came into view. Home. The sanctuary was less a farm and more a fortress. A 10-foot-tall concrete wall, topped with electrified wire, circled the entire property. Watchtowers stood at each corner, the barrels of automated .50 caliber machine guns glinting in the sun. The massive reinforced steel gate was a work of art, strong enough to stop a tank. Maya, open up. The Eagle has landed and he's brought a +1, I said into the comms. Copy that, boss. Welcome home, her cheerful voice crackled back. With a low groan of powerful motors, the massive gate began to slide open, revealing the pristine, orderly world within. Manicured lawns, clean pathways, the solid stone facade of the main house. It was a slice of the old world hermetically sealed against the new one. As we rolled through, the gate hissing shut behind us, I saw it. Parked near the main house was a vehicle that was decidedly not mine. It was a clapped-out, old-school ambulance, the kind you'd see in movies from the 90s. It was dusty and dented, but it was here. Leaning against its side, arms crossed, was a woman. Even from this distance, I could see the messy black hair, the askew glasses, and the impatient, analytical look on her face. She was tapping her foot, checking a watch on her wrist. Dr. Eris Thorne had followed her instructions to the letter, a welcome sign of competence. She wasn't an asset I had to retrieve anymore. She was home. The core of my team was assembled. The game was truly about to begin.